Hi guys, hopefully you can hear me all okay. Welcome to a live stream flight. This is a bit of a test for me for the first time. We're going to do a flight from Manchester to Palma de Mallorca. I'm going to step through the departure. We're going to fly first, the taxi routing, all that sort of stuff. Please give me any feedback if you've got any issues with audio or anything like that. If you can't hear me clearly, I can fiddle with the settings in the OBS stream player so you can hear me clearly. Anyway, here we are in Manchester and we're on stand 12, and what I'm going to do now is bring up the chart and I'll just show you where we are parked. And if we zoom here, we are in this corner of the airport here. We'll put on the SimLink feature so you can see where we are. Here we are on the end of Pier B, which is stand 12, just here. Now the aircraft's fully set up and ready to go. We're going to push back to face south, make a left turn on the second left here onto Kilo, and then Juliet, and then we'll depart either from Juliet 1 or Mike 1 for runway 23 right. The SID we're flying today, we'll talk about that whilst we take off, and we'll view it in the SimLink feature as well. We'll be from runway 23 right, straight ahead 3 miles from Manchester, 275 track till 5 miles from Manchester, left turn inbound to Sanba. So that's the SID we're flying, all the information on the Navtec charts. Here we have the operational flight plan. Now you'll see right at the top of the channel chat, I've provided a link to this so you can view it, and here you can see as we scroll down all the routing information's here, how much fuel we've got, 8.6 tons. But whilst we fly down to Palma, if you have any questions, well, we'll talk you through how to read an operational flight plan. This is from SimBrief, and it's the exact same concept or same flight plan we use for the operator I work for. But that's essentially it for the OFP for now. We'll look at that at a later point. Right, so we'll jump in the aircraft now. As I said, the bridge is away, all the passengers are boarded. The aircraft is fully set up. The stop altitude for the departure is 5,000 feet, and everything else is pretty much ready to go, full 22k for the thrust setting. So what we'll do, we'll get the pushback crew here, pre-plan the pushback, and I've already planned it so we can stop the pushback there, and then we can taxi southeast to runway 23 right.
Ground to cockpit. Plan acknowledged. Call me through the menu when you're ready.
So let's have a look at some of the messages. Everyone's hearing me clearly, very good. I will try and answer some questions when I get some time, so feel free to ask anything about commercial operations or operating the 737-800. So we'll imagine we've contacted Manchester ground, or request push and start has been approved to face south. So we'll do the before takeoff checklist. Before start checklist below the line, put the air conditioning packs to off, anti-collision light is on, verify the parking brake has been set, and put the transponder to out off. And by putting the transponder to out off, ground radar, if installed, they'll be able to see us on their ground radar. Right, start pushback. Hopefully he's there outside.
Ground to cockpit. Tow is driving up.
Oh, here he comes, he's on his way. There he is. So this is a lift tug, so not a tow bar one. So when we talked to the ground crew, we'd confirm all the doors and hatches are closed and the bypass bid is installed, which is the case now. And if we go outside, oops, wrong button there. This is quite a cool little view here. You can see the tug going back nicely. And check out my new paint scheme, this is awesome. Yeah, one of the guys that follows me on my Facebook made this. Is really, really nice of him. There we go, so he's now attaching that. Let's jump back into the flight deck. Imagine no religion, would love to set up from when you get in the plane one day, setting up the flight plan, the FMC, etc. Yeah, I'll do a live stream or a tutorial with the full setup profile, especially in the ZIBO mod. Okay, so he's getting all connected out. I think did he ask me to release the parking brake yet? I can't remember. No, not yet. He's just connecting, and then he'll lift us up. There we go. SID makes studio. ZIBO has added ND rings. Yes, I'm well aware of that feature. I do talk with ZIBO a few times a week just to give him some feedback. And he did mention the ring. The rings have been here actually for a few weeks now, but we'll be using the fixed rings on the approach into Palma de Mallorca. So that's it, cabin is secure, we'll just wait for the ground crew to get connected. Pretty much not much else we can do at the moment.
So connected and bypass pin inserted. Release parking brake.
Excellent, parking brake released, and the time, well, it was actually really early. I was planning the departure to be at 1700 Zulu, but pretty much got everything done. Anyway, release the parking brake, that will get the pushback
Starting
commenced.
pushback, and you may start engines.
Sam JB, I'm 14, currently 11 hours into my PPL, good for you. Have you got any advice on contacting airlines? Well, at this stage, you're coming into the industry at a good time. There's a bit of a pilot shortage. A lot of airlines now run apprenticeship schemes, so you can at least write them, apply for them, and I think you can get your training bonded these days. Otherwise, you know, when I did my PPL, crikey now, 10, 11 years ago, there was not much opportunity, so I had to work part-time, self-fund my PPL, and then self-fund my flight training school, but the information you'll be able to find online. Right, so now we've got the pushback underway, we can start the engine, so we're clear right, starting engine number 2. Move it to ground, EEC is alive, we have N2, EGT is increasing after we get the fuel, and there's the N1 rotation as well. See how the pushback's going on. Excellent. Yeah, flight sims kind of got a lot better since I started doing it about 20 years ago. It's amazing what you can do now. Cool. Alright, N2's coming up to 25%. Idle detent. EGT's now increasing. And we'd keep our hand on the start lever just in case if there was any reason to shut the engine down if there was an aborted engine start. Ryan Hargreaves, not sure if you'll know this. How do you decide which D-rate, if any, to use, as it's through Top Correct or the equivalent of that in real life? Well, I'm very fortunate to have my a copy of the Boeing OPT Performance app, which is what I use for the company I work for, which is on my EFB, so I use that. I've never used TopCat, but a lot of people have told me that TopCat, it's pretty good. It's just as realistic as the Boeing OPT Performance app. But I did use it for this takeoff today. It was just full 22k thrust, which is 92.7. It'll be about 92.1 once it's got the APU bleed on. Perfect. So that's good for engine number 2. We'd usually delay engine start for engine number 1 until the pushback is complete, which we will do, just to be as realistic as possible, just to save as much fuel as possible for the airline. Joachim, do you ever take off flaps 10 in the 737? No, not really with flap 10. Flap 5 is the most common flap setting. I have made a tutorial discussing the different options for flap takeoffs. Flap 1 would be if you're climb limited, so you need to climb away quickly if there was obstacles on the departure, and higher flap settings like flaps 25 and flap 15 you'd use for short takeoff rolls if you had a very short runway, but generally speaking we only use flap 5, and I've only ever used flap 5 for takeoff. Alright, so that's looks like pushback's complete.
Operation complete. Set parking brake.
Okay, parking brake set. Imagine we can clear to start engine number 1.
Close, stand by.
Whilst he's getting that disconnected, we can start engine number 1. Good, there's N2 rotation. Tobias, will you upload the video afterwards? Yes, I am planning on archiving this video afterwards, so once it's finished uploading I will have it available. 25% N2, start lever to idle E10, fuel starts pouring into the engines, CGT's increasing, N1's increasing. What is your trim setting? I think I didn't use the CG setting here. I actually forgot to set it. I think it was like we'll see what it is off this. 4.96. Yeah, it's about 5 units. I had 5.2. Okay, so tugs away. He should be off to the left or right. We'd usually wave him off to see the bypass pin. We'll imagine that's done. Oh, there he is. And you then see the dispatcher or the ground crew wave you off with the pin to tell you that he's clear and you can do the before taxi checklist, which we will do now. So straight onto the overhead panel, generators on. We can now shut the APU off, start switches to continuous, probe heat to on. Whoops, my mouse. Packs to auto, isolation valve auto, APU bleed off, flaps, flap 5 for takeoff, flight controls, full forward, full back, and full left, centre, full right, centre, and then we do a rudder check, full left, centre, and full right, centre. Now you'll notice the tiller's moving here. The captain in reality would grab that tiller to prevent the nose wheel from moving, otherwise it'll just scrub on the ground. Good, we can blank the lower DU, push recall, and we would then complete the before taxi checklist, which hopefully I've not forgotten everything. We're all good to go and start taxiing. So what we'll just do now, we'll have a look at the taxi routing again. If I just bring the charts up, just bear with me 2 seconds, guys. And here you can see where we are, and that's where we just push back to, and to look at the taxi routing. It doesn't, fortunately Simlink's not on this chart, but we're just here. We're going to push back, take the second left onto Kilo, then Juliet, and we'll probably take off via Mike 1 today for runway 23 right. Alright, let me jump back into explain. Cool, so release the parking brake, not quite on the taxi line, and let's do a config check. I see there's quite a few questions coming in. I'll have a look at those just before we take off, or either after we get airborne and we get into the cruise. So if you have any questions, you can ask them. Okie dokie, so maximum taxi speed around the apron is 15 knots, and when we got onto the taxiway, we can taxi up to a maximum of 30 knots. Oh yeah, don't forget to turn on the turn off and taxi lights before you start moving as well. We'll join this taxi line here. So I'm using my rudder pedals to taxi. In reality, you wouldn't touch the rudder pedals, you'd be using just the tiller here. But I don't even know if you can get a tiller as an attachment for a flight sim, not too sure. Perfect. So there's the first left, which we're going to ignore. That was Bravo, and then we'll take the second left onto Kilo. And if you're taxiing in a complex airport, which Manchester isn't too complex, but if you're ever unsure of your position, just bring the aircraft to a stop, notify ATC, they'll either tell you which way to go or have a look at the taxi chart as well. If you fly somewhere complex like Madrid or Barcelona, where I've been a few times, we've just had to stop and go, ooh, just double check, you know, which way we're going, especially if it's your first time flying into that airport. Here we go. Perfect. And now we are established onto the Kilo taxiway. We can complete the before takeoff checklist. So config we've checked, flaps we have 5 green lights, stab trim is set for takeoff, and we'll now do a takeoff briefing. So having a look at the overhead panel, packs are in auto, bleeds are on, the V speeds are set for takeoff, 141, 142, 148 is set. The departure we're flying today, actually I'll bring it up for you on OBS again, so we can be familiar with the departure. We're going to climb straight ahead 3 miles off Manchester, make a right turn 275 track, and then 5 miles after Manchester, left turn inbound to Sanba, and climbing to an altitude of 5,000 feet. So just verify that we have 5,000 feet set, which it is here on the MCP, and that is it. Cabin is secure, the before takeoff checklist is complete. Alright, so taxiing along 12 knots there, cut the corner slightly, and we're making good progress now towards the holding point. Here's Hotel 1 on the right, and we'll take the next right onto Mike. We'll get back onto the taxi line. Captain Jacobs, love this channel, how are you? Very well, thank you very much. Today is my last day off, and I'm back to work tomorrow. I'm doing 5 days working in the simulator. I don't fly too much often these days, do about 30 hours a month, but I work primarily as a Type Rating instructor, teaching new cadets and doing 6 monthly sim checks for line pilots for the company I work for. I will scroll up later and answer some of the other questions, but I will, as this is a critical phase of flight, concentrate on flying the aircraft. I did a test stream a few days ago, and I tried to answer questions whilst taking off and climbing, and I was kind of neglecting the flying of the aircraft. So we'll have plenty of time in the cruise. We've got a nice long cruise to help answer some questions, and we'll talk through in detail the arrival and approach we're flying into Palma this evening. Hopefully we'll catch this sunset quite nicely. Perfect, so Manchester ground, well, imagine we've been transferred to Manchester Tower and we've done the performance figures via mic, and we always try and do intersection takeoffs where we can, so it just saves taxi time and stuff like that. Well, imagine we've been cleared for takeoff, and I haven't got the latest weather in Manchester, but I think the wind was less than 5 knots. I'm just having a look at the METAR on my phone. It's probably an app or something where I can get this quickly on the sim, but I'm not too sure. Let's have a look. Variable at 2 knots, so yeah, that's as easy as it gets. Alright, so pop all the lights on, LNAV, water throttle, strobes on there, and transponder to TARA. So before takeoff checklist, MCP set, transponders in TARA or TARA, strobe lights are on, and the landing lights are on as well. Crikey, what's going on here? Can't get up the hill. Having to add a lot of thrust here. Not sure what's going on there. Definitely don't have the brakes on. That's a bit unrealistic, but never mind. I think we're a little bit of elevation. Not to worry. Cool. So, crikey, this is like trying to go up a 10-degree incline. Like, pedalling hard. I'm not sure what's going on there. That's ZIBO or X-Plane 11. Anyway. Hopefully I haven't shot past the centre line. There we go. Okie dokie guys, some technical difficulties there. My encoder OBS crashed. I bought myself a really super duper fast computer or PC about 6 months ago. I've never had any issue with that before, and for goodness sake it happened, well actually I guess great that it happened just before I pushed Toga and start rolling down the takeoff as well. So really sorry about that guys. If that happens again, we'll get the encoder reset. I'll pause the sim. Once it's back on again, we can unfreeze the sim, so we'll get this flight completed one way or another. Alright, for some reason I've got master caution fuel, low pressure centre pumps. I've got a little bit of fuel in the centre pumps, so I'm not too sure why that's the case. We'll turn them off and we'll turn them back on at 10,000 feet as we do the pre-cruise checks as well. William, try 32-bit OBS. Yes, I will next time. This one is the 64-bit version. If it crashes again, I will try that version. So nothing's changed. I think all I was explaining was when you line up, you've got 233 on the heading, check your track as well, and you want it to be within a couple of degrees or so to make sure that you're on the correct runway for a start, and also that the aircraft is pointing down the centre line. Perfect, so if we're all ready to go, all the lights are on, checklist is complete, let's get on our way. So start the timing, let's release the parking brake, get ourselves into a decent position, 40% N1. That is looking good. Stabilised, set takeoff thrust. Light forward pressure on the control column. Takeoff thrust set indications normal at 92.0 N1. Airspeed to live now. Checked. Releasing the forward pressure now on the control column. Using enough rudder to maintain centre line. To V1. Rotate 2 to 2.5 degrees per second using the rudder to maintain centre line, and we're airborne up to 15 degrees onto the flight directors. Gear up, positive rate of climb, just pitching up to the flight directors now. 400 feet will verify the roll mode, 400, that's LNAV, and just following the flight directors initially, climbing straight ahead until we're 3 miles from the Manchester VOR, which you can see here we've got tuned as well as a backup. There's 1,000 feet. We can now engage the autopilot NADP2 so we can bug up straight away. Bug up. There we go, we've now got climb, power engage, we're above V2 plus 15 and the flap 5 bug, so we can select flap 1. Nice evening over Manchester, very nice. Above the flap 1 bug, we can select flap up. And here you can see how we're progressing nicely on the SID. Here's the first turn at 3 miles. Onto a track of 275. Very good. Ooh, it's going a little bit wayward on the turn there, a little bit aggressive, and there we've got a left turn there. Anyway, flaps are up, no lights. Keep an eye on that. We can select vertical speed as our stop altitude is 5,000 feet. We'll wind that right down to 1,000 feet per minute. Keep the QNH set 1023. We're passing 3,800 feet for 5,000 feet. Now let's do the after takeoff checklist. So we're in cloud, but the total air temperature is above 10 degrees, so we don't need engine anti-ice. And let's do the after takeoff check. So retracts off, taxi light off. We leave these lights on until we get to 10,000 feet. These can go to off. And now we carefully check the air conditioning and pressurization. We've got a differential pressure of 1.2 psi, so we are pressurized. No split in the duct pressures, and the temperatures are set. Gear to up and off, auto brake to off, and that's it. The after takeoff checklist is complete. And yes, we could re-engage VNAV, Johnny Mark, but at the moment I want to keep my rate of climb below 1,000 feet per minute. Otherwise, we'll could get a TA if there was traffic above. So we as a company, our procedure is to slow the rate of climb. 2,000 feet to go to 2 to go, 1,000 feet to 1 to go. So we can just bug 220 knots. We'll re-engage VNAV shortly. And let's just check our profile on the SID charts. There you go. You can see now we're established on the 155 or the 335 radial inbound to Honolulu. So what we'll do now, we'll tune the Honolulu VOR, and you'll see here it should come up pointing directly at the needle. There we go, you see how the needle's coming round on the ND and we're routing directly to Honolulu. So if we were to lose the FMC, we can route conventionally. Okay, so imagine we've now been handed over from Manchester Tower to Scottish radar, and it's quite quiet this evening. We've been told to climb, let's make it up, flight level 240. That is now... Alright guys, so yeah, I'm just replying to the a few comments here on the stream. So really sorry about this at the moment. The sim is paused. It's exactly where we left it when OBS crashed again. It's OBS that keeps crashing. I shouldn't have any issues with the PC. The internet connection I have is fibre optic. It's pretty good. So as soon as we're ready, I'll unfreeze the sim and I'll just maintain 5,000 feet, and nothing has changed. I've re-engaged VNAV and we're just waiting to push out into vent to climb faster. So if you can hear me, yeah, I can hear you now. 5 out of 5, that's a good sign. It does say the stream status is bad, but please let me know if you're having any further issues and I'll try and resolve them. Okay, so we're now maintaining 5,000 feet, being cleared to a higher flight level. It was flight level 240, so we can push out into vents. There we go. We have N1 and VNAV speed, and we're now climbing to flight level 240. So we can set standard on both the captain's and first officer side, passing 50 for flight level 240. Off we go. So I just had a quick run around the house to make sure there was nothing else running, nothing being downloaded on the Xbox, nothing being downloaded on my other computer, so we have the best internet connection possible for the live stream. Okay, so we're now climbing away. Let's just monitor our progress on the Navigraph charts. You can see here we are just at the end of the San Basid here. And there we go, that's now finished. So what we can do, we can close this and we can keep an eye out on the en route charts. And here we go, this is our routing today. These are all official airways, so we're taking the November 859 to this waypoint here, which is pretty much overhead Birmingham, continuing southeast just to the west of London, Tel to Sitet. That's the FIR boundary in between Paris and London. Continuing southbound over Amboise, VOR, Limoges, and Netro Lombra. Here's the Spanish Bordeaux-Barcelona FIR boundary. We're then crossing just to the east of Barcelona and we'll be commencing our descent over the Mediterranean Sea. And there we go, inbound to Palma. That's the start of the arrival into Palma, which is Lorez. Okay, so we can get rid of the charts. Now let's concentrate on the flying. So we see we're still inbound to the Honolulu VOR. Next thing that's going to happen is passing flight level 100. We'll do the pre-cruise checks. The aircraft will then accelerate from 250 knots to the best climb speed, which is 270 knots today, and we're going to be cruising at flight level 370. So this, you see you have the localizer deviation bar. This shouldn't be here if you have a VOR tuned. That's only if you have an ILS tuned, so hopefully that will be disappearing in an update. So there we go, passing flight level 100 for 240. Let's do the pre-cruise checks. We can turn all of the forward-facing lights off now. Oops. And the only lights we have on above 10,000 feet are the strobe lights and the anti-collision light on. We again carefully check the pressurization system, because the 800, although very reliable, it's quite an old school system. It actually hasn't changed in its design in about 40 years. So we carefully check this every 10,000 feet. We've got differential pressure of 3.0 psi. The cabin altitude is around 3,000 feet, so that's good. Pressurization mode selected as auto. Duct pressure's fine. The temperatures are set. We push recall, and remember we had a bit of fuel on the in the centre tank, 620 kilos, so we'll use that now. We shouldn't get master caution fuel. I'm not too sure why that's on, but we'll keep an eye on it. Yeah, we'd have to look at the QRH if they stayed on, but not to worry. Anyway, that's it. Oh yeah, better release the passengers as well. Oh yeah, we would have released the cabin crew as part of the after takeoff checklist, but I was trying to fix the stream. Okay, so we'll imagine we've got further climb, let's say flight level 320. In London airspace especially, it's very unusual to get a climb as direct as this, especially on a Friday evening. You get a step climb all the way just to the amount of traffic we have. Alright, so for some reason my stream status still says bad, so I hope you can still see me clearly. Please let me know if you're having any problems. Let's have a look at some of these questions you might have as we continue the climb. Good, 5 out of 5. Giorgio172, what's your weather engine? This is just X-Plane 11. nothing else. The Manchester scenery you saw was from UK 2000. Otherwise, all we're using here is X-Plane 11 and the ZIBO mod, nothing else. I think there's some weather engines you perhaps might need to use, but this sim out the box is just the best sim I have ever used, and I've been flight simming, well, not so much the last, well, a lot now more recently since I started my channel, but I had a bit of a hiatus for about 6 years, simming for 20 years, and this is just phenomenal, like what you can do now. This is just out the box X-Plane 11. What other questions we have? Thomas, fingers crossed it remains this way. Yes, me too. Hopefully no more crashes from OBS. What encoder did you use? It's OBS, and it's all... I mean, I don't know anything about computers, guys, but it says on the CPU 9.7%, 30 frames per second, which would kind of make me guess that it's handling okay with everything at the moment. Darren a bit premature, I know, but what approach will you be using? Well, operational flight plan based on the forecast weather has us on the Lores 1 Papa in Palma de Mallorca for runway 24 left, but we'll discuss that in detail in the cruise. Johnny Mark, hello, do you have en route charts? Yes, I'm using the Navigraph en route charts and the Simlink feature as well. I am recording this stream for the people that are asking, but hopefully I'll be able to edit out the little glitches we had so you can view it later. Very good. Dean Anthony, what would be the implications of leaving the isolation valve in open during the entire flight? Well, it would depend on the position of the packs. I mean, if you leave it in open, it shouldn't have much. It should stay open, but you won't be using the air conditioning system from, I can't remember which side it is now, I'd have to review FCOM 2, but yeah, you just don't leave it in open basically, that's why we have to leave it in the checklist, but I'll double check what the implication is. You'd have back pressure perhaps if with the APU bleed, but not too sure off the top of my head. Yeah, lots of people have asked, have you tried VATSIM? I have, a couple of times with my FSX Steam, but it's okay. It's can be quite realistic. It's very different to the way ATC is handled in real life. What I found with VATSIM, you kind of have limited coverage. So you take off, you might have someone to talk to on tower, then you don't have anyone to talk to, which is a bit alien to me. But obviously, it's something I might try a bit more in the future. We might even do a tutorial on VATSIM in the future as well. Good, so passing 20,000 feet, again we'll check the air conditioning system and pressurization. Diff pressures 5.0, all looking good. Temperatures are fine as well. So that is it, and this is it. The workload, once you get away above 10,000 feet, it drops off quite a bit. We're just, during the climb, prior to cruise, it's what we call a sterile phase of flight, so the only things that we are concentrating on is the flight path. Any discussion we have is only about the flight in question, so any changes. We can't talk about the UEFA Champions League football result, say, between Liverpool and Roma. That would have to wait until the cruise, and any other things like that. But I can talk to you guys, obviously, flight sim. Will you keep using FSX or P3D? Well, I've actually never tried Prepared. Never. I might do, but I really like X-Plane 11, and I've got FSX Steam. It's okay for the purpose of my channel, making tutorials. It's fine as a platform. I've been told the flight dynamics of Prepared are very similar to Flight Sim, so if that's the case, the handling probably isn't as realistic. The way X-Plane 11 I've found simulates flight is a lot more realistic. It looks at airflow. And the way, for example, this ZIBO mod handles it's really realistic compared to, say, well, the PMDG is an absolutely fantastic product, but I think it's scuppered by the flying model of FSX, so it doesn't handle quite the same. But things that when you're flying this aircraft manually, it feels a lot more realistic in X-Plane 11. Jorky Boy, sterile cockpit is before 10,000 feet, maybe for certain operators, but certainly for the airlines I've worked for, the one I currently work for now, sterile cockpit is from engine start all the way until top of climb. From top of climb to top of descent, that's when we can talk about whatever we like, have a discussion outside of work maybe, but every time outside of that we must only talk about the flight that we're using. Vincent Leaf, window heat. Don't tell me I forgot to turn it on. Oh, it is on, so not too sure what you're referring to there, but if I had forgot to turn it on, it would have been a bit of a disaster. Reese, hi there, what yoke, joystick and throttles do you use? I am using my Logitech Extreme 3D Pro joystick, which I've had for about 10 years, and it's absolutely fine for what I need to do in a flight sim. I don't really need to use a yoke. I don't need to use that in the real sim and the real aircraft. And I've got one of these ones, SciTech Pro Flight rudder pedals. Yeah, they're perfect for the job, you know, for what I need to use. Ryan Hargreaves, is there any reason you start engine 2 before engine 1? Thanks for the great video, you're most welcome. No, not really. It's really conventionally, because on the left hand side of the aircraft is where all the passengers board, it's where all the equipment is, so we generally start engine number 2 first. It doesn't make much difference, but if we have to do what we call a cross bleed start, we actually have to start engine number 1 first, and then we use the bleed pressure from engine number 1, which you can see here, to start engine number 2. So it's just tradition really. You could start engine number 1 first, but we always start engine number 2. There we go. Let's have a look at some of these other questions. Let's see, fuel center pumps. We've only got 10 kilos of fuel now, so we can turn those pumps off. Not sure why those low pressure lights stayed on. They would have come on now had the figure been on 0, but they could definitely come off. Martin, how are the sim checks structured? Do you prepare nightmare scenarios in advance? Well, yeah, when we have guys in for their 6-month recurrency training, we have a very structured way of doing recurrency training. So every pilot will get the same thing. It's divided into 2 halves. The first part is what we call an OPC, which is an operator's proficiency check, which is where they have to do pretty much the same thing every time. They'll have an engine failure at V1, a single engine ILS, they'll have some sort of technical problem which will be related to the systems, which over a course of 3 years it covers all the systems on the aircraft. So things like, I think at the moment we look at air conditioning and pressurization, so we'll give them a rapid depressurization to deal with. But training in the airline industry is changing at the moment. We're going to be moving to a format called resilience training, and basically events that happen on in real life will be used, and we call that evidence-based training. So for example, that Southwest aircraft where the engine blew up and shattered that window, that would be looked at in the future by training departments in airlines, and they'll develop scenarios based on that. So that's how it works in a nutshell. Guessing that means you are a fellow Liverpool fan then. Well, to be fair, I don't really follow football. I'm afraid I'm a dirty Chelsea fan really, so I didn't get very far in the Championship this year. Let's have a look at some of these other questions. Tom Christian, how does indicated airspeed affect head and tailwind? So hello again, Tom. You comment on a lot of my videos. It makes no difference on your indicated airspeed. So for example, we have a 26 knot tailwind at the moment. Our airspeed is exactly the same. The only thing that's going to affect is the ground speed, really. And yeah, when you're an airline pilot, this is what you like to see on the return sector, not on the first sector, because that means you'll have a longer flight to eventually get home. Alright, so a couple of things have happened since we've climbed. Passing above flight level 300, we set the angular bank selector to 10 degrees. That means if we go onto a heading, it limits the angle to 10 degrees. If you bank over that, you could get yourself into a bit of sticky situation if you're at a very high cruise level. So imagine we've contacted London again, and they've cleared us to our final cruise level, which is flight level 370. There we go, and that is now set. We check it 3 times, once on the overhead panel, twice on the MCP, and then lastly in the FMC. And then lastly, what we do, we make sure that we monitor this frequency here, which is 121.5. This is the international distress frequency, and I can't select it on here on the ZIBO mod, but if we lost radio contact with ATC controllers, the first way they tried to contact us was to call us on the frequency we were listening to. If not, they would then contact us on the emergency frequency, which is a bit embarrassing if you have to ever do that, but that's why we tune it, so we can listen out. Jim Bobo Leah 33, how do your ears cope with the daily changes in pressure? You just get on with it, really, and I think, to be fair, if you're exposed to it every single day, I have no problems now equalising my ears. So when I go up, you can hear that your sinus is clicking. I don't have to hold my nose and blow anymore, and it's just a part of life, really, and you get used to it, really. Even if you fly light aircraft in general aviation, it doesn't even cross my mind now. I think one thing that we must never do, though, if you're an airline pilot, is fly with a cold. All right, so if you ever fly with a cold and you have problems trying to clear your ears, or your eustachian ear tube gets blocked, it can be extremely painful. I've not had that problem, but I have flown with a captain once who had a little bit of a cold. In climb it's not so bad, but in descent, as the air pressure increases, all the air's trying to get forced out, and it really can be painful. So yeah, that's one thing that could be an issue. What other questions do we have here? Yeah, keep them coming in, keep them going in. Once you've passed the Honley VOR, when will the FMC go into auto-tune? Well, the 737 FMS, certainly with the fleet I currently fly for, it doesn't have an auto-tune feature, but what we could do, we can tune the next VOR if you like, and that's Compton. So there's two ways of finding a frequency for Compton. Now, I don't know if it's working with the ZIBO mod, but we'll try it. If we go to menu, no, not there, index, nav data, and we can type in the ident, Compton, navade ident, summary. It usually would come up in the real aircraft with the frequencies here for the Compton VOR. No, it's not giving it to me, but doesn't matter. What we'll do then, we'll bring up the chart and we can just simply find the Compton VOR that way. So do this. Let's go back to the Simlink and center on our aircraft. And you can see here, there's Compton 114.35. So what we can do, we'd get the. In reality, you could get the chart out in the aircraft. We still have paper charts. This is a lot more sophisticated, this Navigraph Simlink feature that we have on the real aircraft. And we'll tune it up, so 114.35. Go into the flight plan. And tune that down here. Put it on both boxes so you can see. That's checked for 1 to go. And there we go. You can now see we're now pointing directly to the Compton VOR, and the distance to go is 8.5 miles. So one thing I just want to show you here, you see how the distance varies. So we've got Compton 5.3 and here 7.8. The reason for that, this is called slant range. So as we fly overhead the beacon, it's actually measuring the distance from the beacon, the VOR on the ground, and our altitude. So that's why this DME distance is different. This is based on RNAV and the FMC position. So when we fly overhead Compton, this will say 0, and this will be the distance in nautical miles above the VOR. So that's probably a fun fact that you've learned today. So here we go, getting up to flight level 370. Nice view outside. Bit of cumulus activity there. Oops, I completely forgot. The captain would have turned the weather radar on before takeoff as well. So we always want to be scanning the weather radar. And there we go, overhead the VOR. We're 6 nautical miles above the VOR, and that's at 0 and now inbound to Vapid, and that's it. There we go, flight level 370. Right, so I'm just going to look at some more questions you might have. Excellent. So it looks like OBS is holding on, no more crashes, hopefully. Quasi Dodds to this channel is golden, thank you very much. Crikey's quite a few messages here. My goodness me, we'll try and get through some of them. Fireblade 103, do pilots train for water landing now? So actually it doesn't become part of the type rating, but we do look at it every 3 years in the simulator. What we do, we simulate a dual engine failure at 2 different times after takeoff. One of them is so low to the ground that you have no option but to ditch straight ahead of you or do an off-field landing, and one of them we do at around 5,000–6,000 feet, so we've got to try and do a 180-degree turn to land on the reciprocal runway, which is something you're told not to do if you're flying in a light aircraft, but in a commercial aircraft like the 737, your rate of climb is so high that you usually might have a chance to do a 180-degree turn to come back on the runway. Hi Flight Sim, are you required to test the GPWS before takeoff? No, we just do it on the first flight of the day. We do the full test here, just to make sure it's working. If there's any faults, we'd have to look at the MEL to see if we could dispatch. Okay. Yes, so Hell, could you please turn on the weather radar? Well spotted, that's something I should have done. What else have we got here? Well, appreciate the help. Can you make a crash plane? Well, I don't intend to crash the plane today, but if I wanted to, I could. No thanks. Quasi, why is the bank restricted to 10 degrees? So, yeah, as you saw there, passing flight level 300, we set the angle of bank to 10 degrees, because in heading select, if we were to push heading now, and the aircraft you can see now turns, we want to limit the bank angle to Alright guys, that's the third time we've had a crash now, so really sorry about that. I've actually copied to clipboard the crash report there, so I can actually send that to OBSC, actually is what's causing it, but not too sure what that is. But yeah, if you're having issues with the stream, because I've got a good connection, I'll just refresh it, you should be able to see everything there. Perfect, yeah, 5 out of 5, thanks Momix2000. Really sorry about this guys, it's very frustrating, but thankfully you can't hear any of my expletives as this happens. So if it happens again, we'll just carry on, I'll pause the sim, we'll hopefully get this flight done as far as we can. Cool, alright. Good. Yeah, pitch mode did vanish, I just realised that. LNAV and VNAV disconnected for some reason. We're now inbound to the Goodwood VOR. Perfect. So, I think I was answering some questions previously. Okay, so now I think I've just got the sim. I was having a look at the OBS settings there to make sure there's not anything I've missed, but we look like we're okay. Hopefully, third time lucky, it'll stay together now. I did a test stream of a 2-hour flight privately and I had absolutely no problems whatsoever yesterday, so I don't know what's causing it. I don't know if it's a Friday night, everyone's on the internet, I have no idea. It could be anything. Right, let's have a look at some of these other questions. Random guy, got a question for you. Have you been into emergency outside of training? No, nothing serious. In 6 years I've done just over 4,000 hours on the 737 now. I've had, probably the worst thing was fuel filter bypass. We had to divert and we actually had a minor electrical fault once, but nothing nasty like engine failures, or I've never had a wind shear. Or nasty terrain escape, stuff like that. So thankfully keep all that in the simulator. I've done 2 go-arounds in 6 years as well, so sometimes they happen more often than others. It really depends where you fly in and out from, but hopefully, touch wood, nothing serious. Momix2000, best approach for you? I don't really have a super favourite one. I think I mentioned in a live stream, a test one I did the other day, I'd love flying into Malta. When you come in over the sea, you fly over Sicily if you're coming in from the north, and then you either get vectored to the left or the right of the island. It's fantastic. You just go into a circle around the island and then come in. The Canaries are pretty cool as well. I like flying into the Canary Islands as well. Quasi does that. I'm a rebel. I shall stay awake to watch Flight Deck to Sim. Well, thank you very much. I'll stay awake as long as we can get to Palma with all the glitches that OBS seems to be giving me this evening. Dean, what situations would you have both engine starts in flight mode? Usually just continuous for takeoff and landing and ground for start. So yeah, we use continuous if we are in icing with the engine anti-ice. Flight mode, if you have an engine failure in flight, we can put it into flight and then we cycle the engine start lever. And you can also put it on in severe turbulence and very heavy precipitation, you know, or icing, just to reduce the risks of flame out. But if you had an engine flaming out, you have a drop at N2 and EGT, it wouldn't matter. The igniters both automatically fire into the combustion chamber to prevent the engine, or try to prevent the engine from failing. Yeah, one of the next tutorials I'm going to do will actually look at something that a lot of people have requested, which is the engine failure at V1. I might actually make a return to the PMDG for that one, because the systems, obviously, it's a complete product, and we can talk through what we do if the engine went bang just after V1 and would turn for a single engine ILS. Very good. Alright, so I'll let some more questions come in and we'll just check our progress so far. We're just across the English Channel now. You can see here the coastline of the UK. Actually, I don't usually like doing it in my tutorials because I like to be as realistic as possible, but let's do a little external view. There you go, that's my awesome new livery. There we go. So here you can see the south coast of the UK very nicely. There we go, so over the English Channel, continuing to Palma. Now let's have a look at the en route chart as well. So you can see here, we're now en route to Sitet, and you can see here where it says UIR, that's the Upper Information Region or FIR boundary. So in reality, if we're here at flight level 370, we're talking to London, and then just prior to Sitet, we get a frequency change to, I think it's Paris, I don't know what the frequency is off the top of my head, and then yeah, they would we would talk to them for the next kind of 25-30 minutes as we head on towards Bordeaux. So that's the FIR boundary. I've spent many a time routing direct to Sitet before. Alright, we'll look at the arrival into Palma a little bit later on, because it's quite a long cruise actually. When I say quite a long cruise, I'm going to be here at least for another hour and 10 minutes. So about 30 minutes prior to top of descent, we'll start setting up for ILS 24 left in Palma De Mallorca. Actually, what we'll do, because I think this is a cool little feature with ZIBO's one, it's actually got ACARS fitted. So if we go to menu, ACARS, ATIS request, we can actually put in the 4-letter ICAO code for Palma De Mallorca, press send, and hopefully they will hopefully we'll get a message back giving us the latest weather in Palma, so we can see if there's any changes, and that will help us prepare for the approach into Palma De Mallorca. Sean Boyle, are you going to do fuel and waypoint checks for timings? Yeah, we could do that actually, because I've got the operational flight plan. Actually, we could do one at Sitet if you like. So when we get to Sitet, we'll have a look at the OFP, which is from SimBrief. It's the exact same format we use for the company I work for. And we'll just see how ZIBO's fuel burn is performing and timing and stuff like that. We've been airborne now for 32 minutes. We've got about an hour and 30 minutes until we get to Palma. The flight time is about 2 hours 5 minutes or something like that. Ninja Monkey, how close do you think is the PMDG 737 to the real Boeing 737? It is very close. It is a fantastic training tool as well. I joined my first airline in 2011. It's my first ever time getting a commercial airline job, and I'd used PMDG before that, but during my type rating it really was pretty useful to compare or practice procedures, especially with FMC training. The FMC is quite not difficult to manage, but when you're new, especially I find when new cadets, if they're unfamiliar with the PMDG or haven't used it, they take a little bit more training on the FMC. I can usually tell the difference between people who have used flight sim at some points in life compared to people who say haven't. But not to say, a lot of people ask if I can fly the PMDG 737, can I fly the real 737? Well, I've had one of my friends in the real simulator at work, and I sat him down, and he had flown Flight Simulator before, and he couldn't even work out how to move the seat forward. So if you were to jump in, you wouldn't even know how to move it and reach the pedals, perhaps. But yeah, don't get me wrong, it is a fantastic training product. It really does match accurately what you need to do. And the same with ZIBO's mod as well. I can apply real-world operating procedures pretty accurately, and you get the desired result too. Random guy, do you prefer long flights or short flights, and why? Well, yeah, long flights are good because you get a little bit more pocket money from the flight. You get paid a bit better because we're all paid on scheduled block time for the current company I work for. But I like a bit of a mixture, really. I quite like doing a nice long flight. It gives me a chance to study up, look at the manuals a bit longer, and then the same way I quite enjoy doing short 4-sector days sometimes, just doing a lot more handling, because handling's quite limited in the, you can't obviously fly manually in the cruise, you're actually prohibited from in RVSM airspace, but you can do a lot more handling lower to the ground, and if you do 4 sectors, that's 2 takeoffs and landings you get to do. Captain will do 2 sectors, and the first officer will do 2 sectors as well. Momix 2000, will you please help ZIBO to make the 737 perfect for us? Yes, I'm giving as much input to ZIBO as I personally can. I talk to him probably a couple of times a week. I can't remember who it was, someone on my Facebook page who follows me, he posted about ZIBO, and I said, yeah, I'll give it a shot. I've never flown in X-Plane before. I downloaded it, I was like, crikey, this is free, you know, I can't believe what you can get for free now, and it is fantastic. So yeah, I mean, sometimes weekly this aeroplane gets better. Gosh, I got completely distracted. I said we were going to do a fuel check at Sitet, which we've got flown past, and I completely forgot about the weather in Palma de Mallorca. So let's have a look there in Palma. So that was recorded at 15:30, so it was a couple of hours ago, a bit late. Surface wind 310 at 6 knots, so yeah, we still runway 24 left in use, 10 kilometres, few clouds at 2,500 feet, broken at 5,000 feet, temperature's 15 degrees, dew point is 12, and the QNH is 1012. So we can actually put now the forecast QNH in here, and if it changes we can update it later. Oops, should be able to put it without a slash, I think, can't remember now. There we go. Alright, so as we approach Etrat, we'll get the Navtech chart app out again, and you can see here, there's Etrat, which is right on the coastline of France there, off the English Channel. So we'll zoom in slightly. We're about a third of the way on our, along the route to Palma. So what we'll do now, we'll close... Oops, helps if actually you can't see the charts, guys, sorry. I forgot about that on OBS. So if I do this... There we go, so sorry about that. Now you can see the chart. You can see we're inbound to Etrat, which is right on the coastline of France. And what we'll do now, we'll check the OFP in a second, if I remember how to bring up that here. There we go, and I'll bring up the PDF, and we'll check at Etrat what we should be doing. Oops, long way. So SORAP, Narak, Gaiac. Was there we go, here's Etrat here, so we'll zoom in slightly, hope you can all see this clearly, and we'll talk about all the information that's here on the waypoint. There we go, so we'll bring Etrat right to the top of the menu. So what I'll just do, we'll bring the PDF, we'll keep the PDF there just because when I open Explain 11, I can't actually see the PDF document, so it's a bit difficult for me. So we've got 1.8 miles to Etrat, and we should be there at 17:39. And the fuel we have on board, that is 5.9 tons. So if we look here at the OFP, you can see here Etrat, we should have 5.9. And we've got, look at that, 5.9 tons. So you guys are so lucky to have SimBrief, because it's the same format, it's the same system that we use to generate our OFP, so it's pretty accurate. And we've probably burnt 2.6 tons. Now I can't remember with the ZIBO mod if you can see the fuel used. You'd open the engine up, flick it to used. No, it's not. It's only giving us the fuel flow, but in the real aircraft, if you flick it to used, it will show you, as long as you remember to reset it, how much fuel you have on board the aeroplane. So the only other thing is to see how we are progressing on time. So we've been airborne now for 38 minutes, so that means we were airborne at 1701. If we go back onto the chart, bring up the PDF. Remember, we were airborne at 1701. We should be at Etrat 34 minutes into the flight, and we were in fact 38 minutes. Now the reason that is, if you remember, the OBS crashed and I maintained 5,000 feet for a little bit longer than was expected. This flight plan presumes a continuous climb, ignoring the altitude restrictions, so that kind of makes sense. I'd only expect to be a couple of minutes away from the OFP, but in the cruise again we'll look at that in a little bit more detail about some of the information that appears on the operational flight plan. Stand burning, maybe download a plugin called Headshake. It makes realistic head movements in the cockpit. Yeah, I'll have a look at that. The only plugin I think I have installed is the Better Pushback plugin. Is why Explain 11? Because it's the best sim I think there is, in my personal opinion. But I will still be using FSX Steam and maybe Prepared in the future. I think there's a lot more you can get with regards to the community. There's not as much as there is for Explain 11, but it is growing quickly. Fireblade 103, in a day, do you stay with the same aircraft and same captain, or do you swap throughout the day? So yeah, typically, yeah, same crew from the who you meet in the morning in the crew room, and you'll stay with them through the whole day, and yet generally the same aircraft as well. And we typically do 2 or 4 sectors depending on the what's on the roster. Very occasionally, for operational reasons, operations will make an aircraft change, and it could be that they're repositioning an aircraft. So for example, let's imagine I was based in Manchester, flying to Palma de Mallorca. We'd stay with the same crew, but when we land in Palma de Mallorca, we might actually change aircraft during the turnaround and fly a different aircraft back to Manchester. But we have no control in that. That's all done by operations, who decide where the aircraft are kept, where the aircraft need to be. Nicola 16789, does the real 737 NG have a weird pitch down moment right after takeoff like ZIBO's one? Yes, it does, which is, it goes back to my point as to why Explain 11 is so good, because it realistically provides lift and airflow just like it does in the real aircraft. And the 737 suffers from a phenomenon called the dead band. So when you rotate, when you get to the rotation speed, you in the real aeroplane you increase the back pressure, and you maintain a rotation rate of around 2 to 2.5 degrees per second. And when you get to an attitude of approximately 10 degrees, you have to then increase your back pressure due to this phenomenon called the dead band. And the dead band is caused by the airflow over the horizontal stabilizer being disrupted by the airflow over the wing. So the rotation of 737 is a 2-stage rotation. You increase the back pressure until you're at 10 degrees, and then you have to pull back again to maintain that rotation rate, which is quite accurately modelled with ZIBO's mod and in Explain 11. So, you don't feel that in FSX so much. Now that isn't a fault of the PMDG, that's a fault with the way flight dynamics I think are programmed within FSX. Quasi, what does a ruffle mean? I think it's roll on the floor laughing, if I remember rightly. Oh yeah, Darren answered that for me, thanks. Half a minute said, can you fly the visual approach into Madeira? Yeah, I think I'll do some tutorials in the future, challenging approaches. I've never flown into Madeira or Innsbruck or anything like that, but I'll try and interpret the data on the charts, and we'll have a shot at doing that as realistically as possible in some tutorials in the future. So if there's any questions I might have asked, I've missed some here. Sorry about that, I'm getting quite a few. Here. Sam JB, would having my PPL help me get into an airline? Well, it depends what route you want to take. There, you can now do, I can't remember what it's called. It's called an MPL course, so you can actually join a flight training school, go for all the way through flight training without actually ever flying a light aircraft. You know, you can actually never fly solo in a way. It's called MPL. I went the other way, the traditional route of getting a PPL. Did my flight training over a year and a half, and then I finished with a frozen ATPL, and then joined the airline, and then I had it unfrozen when I reached 1500 hours. Sean Ball, very good question. How do you know you're in the perfect seating position in the real aircraft? What would you do to line yourself up? So the way you can see in the sim, I've sat myself here, is the kind of eye position I would kind of like. And certainly from the first officer's seat here, you see the auto brake disarm lights. You want it around there so you can just about see your light, and so you can also see the top of the glare shield. So it's a bit, you know, obviously in the confines of a simulator and the point of view, it's a bit more difficult, but you want to be able to see just the top of the glare shield, you know, this surface here, and that's the kind of right eye position. So this sort of position here is one I'd feel comfortable with. Same with the captain, just so you can see the top of the glare shield here. Now certain aircraft will have little eye view points as well. The 737 doesn't have any of those features. So it's a lovely day over north of France. Looking out the window on the seat here, very good. You can see my little logo there, that's cool. There probably are some clouds over France. I don't know if it might be the weather engine's not programming it, I'm not too sure. Certainly cloudy. It was certainly cloudy the other day because I did a flight over France. Looking good though. So how are we progressing? Oh yes, you might notice on the MFD that's open, and we generally keep that closed. So if you had an engine failure, that would pop up, and you'd get bring it to your attention and be like, "Oh, what's that popped up?" And it pops up if you have an exceedance in any of those secondary parameters. So you might wonder, well, why don't I just keep them on? Well, we turn it off for that reason. Currently have a retired airline captain watching the stream. No mistakes like briefing the approach to the wrong runway. Okay, yeah, I'll try not to, but yeah, you must realise, single pilot, it is challenging flying this aircraft as realistically as possible on your own, but it can be done. That's why there's two of us. Darren A, are you mostly EU flights, or do you want to do long haul? I think it was my dream to do long haul, fly a wide body jet, but I think the glamour's all gone now. I think airlines now who are flying long haul, the pilots get very tired. I train a lot of pilots who have joining our company, who've come from a long haul airline, and they tell me these stories how tiring it is on these long sectors. So yeah, I would love to tick the box and go, yeah, I've flown a wide body jet, 777 Jumbo or 78, but no, I really like flying the 73 and doing short hops, and you don't suffer from jet lag as well, which is a great bonus. Jim Bobo Leah 33, why is the horizontal localizer visible on the PFD? Yeah, that shouldn't be there. I think that's just a little bug with ZIBO's mod. I'll give him some feedback saying that shouldn't be there. That should only appear if you tune a ILS frequency. If you've got a VOR frequency like I have, it should only just have the well, it shouldn't have a localizer deviation path. Darren, I think long haul would bore me to death. Yet me too. Sometimes on a 4-hour flight, it can get a bit boring doing that. So I couldn't imagine flying much longer than that. Thomas Nobrega, what would happen in the event of Command A autopilot failure? Well, the autopilot would disconnect, and we have 2 autopilots, so we'd engage Command B in that case. Now, if you had a dual autopilot failure, which would be incredibly unlikely, we'd have to descend outside of what we call RVSM airspace, which is what we're currently flying. Now, RVSM stands for Reduced Vertical Separation. It's from 290 to, I can't remember what the top height is off the top of my head, but to be in RVSM airspace you must have at least one autopilot with an altitude hold function, so we would have to descend at least to flight level 290. But yeah, chances of having a double autopilot failure incredibly rare. I don't think we've ever had or heard of a single autopilot failure ever, so it would be unlikely to happen. Perfect. So yeah, thank you, Andrew. And this part of France is very sunny at the moment, so at least that's weather engine's working well. So still got a little bit of fuel in the centre tank. That would usually get sucked up by the main fuel pumps, but we'll keep it light. It's only 10 kilos, so it will make no difference. So flying over the Amboise VOR, what we'll do, we'll go back onto the chart and we'll find the frequencies for Amboise and Kayak. Remember how to bring the charts up. There we go. So we have Amboise 113.7, and the next frequency after Balan, all the way down here, I think. Oops, just left the waypoint there. Yeah, this is the SimLink feature for Navigraph, which is pretty awesome. We don't even have this in the real aircraft. You can, we've got just the paper charts, so you can track. We've got them on the iPad app, but otherwise wouldn't use them. But we'll just tune the Amboise VOR for now, which is 113.7. Now, there's no requirement to tune all these frequencies, but generally we do, just so as a backup. If you were to have any issues with the FMS, you can just easily route direct to a VOR. So there we go. We've got the Amboise VOR now tuned. And we're pointing to the needle, 42 miles to go. Random guy, what would happen if you'd get over the maximum allowed cruise altitude? Well, you get a bit of a ticking off, probably get fired, but the aircraft can be safely operated up to the maximum cruise altitude, so in this case flight level 390, but you get very close to something called coffin corner. That's to say, if you start going a little bit over your correct airspeed, you can get Mach buffet or high-speed buffet, and if you go a little bit lower on speed, you can actually get into a stall. So we generally, we wouldn't fly up to flight level 390. We could do, but we wouldn't want to, because if you had a bit of turbulence, you can get yourself into a sticky situation. Optimal-wise, we would plan to generally stay around there. We're slightly above it now, 370. But you can see, there you go, it's just changed to 364. As we burn off fuel, the FMC would like you to fly higher, because the higher you go, the more efficiently a jet engine works. But that doesn't always warrant the most optimal height to fly. It doesn't take into account any tailwinds. So for example, we might actually cruise a little bit lower to utilise, say, a jet stream, so we have a much stronger tailwind, and that would be more efficient, say, than flying to a higher altitude. Joe Mihalik, in the event of a major failure like engine explosion or cabin depressurization, do you always run through checklists, or are some situations so severe that you fly it to the land ASAP? So yeah, for very serious situations, we have for certain serious situations, we have something called memory items. So if we were to have a cabin blowout or a rapid depressurization now, we have a set drill to go through, which you must know off by heart. Now, if you go into your check on your 6-month check and you don't know it, or you make a mistake, you probably fail that item. The priority with that is to descend the aeroplane, get on oxygen first, and then we have to configure the aircraft accordingly to try and pressurize it and get down to the MSA as quickly as possible. There are certain situations which are outside the scope of checklists. Taking, for example, the Southwest incident that happened in America last month, they had an engine fire and a turbine blade failure, which led to a rapid depressurization. There is no checklist which covers that situation. There isn't a engine failure and rapid depressurization checklist. So you'd have to use your knowledge as flight crew, your experience, to ensure the safest outcome. And certain situations where what we call no time available emergencies, for example, going to Hudson River, if you had a double engine failure at 1,000 feet, there is there's no checklist that covers that situation. You just got to use your instincts and fly as safely as possible. Moix 2000, sorry, 4 AM here, have to sleep, have a safe landing, see you next time, can I wait. Thank you very much for coming in and watching the stream. I will be archiving the stream. I'll check and edit it to remove those issues I was having with OBS earlier, so you will hopefully be able to view the landing later. Gallardo, have you flown an Airbus before, 320 or 330? I haven't flown an Airbus. I'd love to go try the simulator to see what it's all about, but Airbus, the way the logic works, that it's very different to Boeing's philosophy. So Airbus, you manipulate the controls on the joystick. You don't actually physically fly the plane. You're flying a computer. You let go of the joystick and it holds the attitude, it holds the angular bank. Very similar to a mode we have on here called control wheel steering, but I'll do a tutorial to explain that's used there. Boeing's philosophy is great. There you go. You've got a big thumping control column. You've got some big rudder pedals, and you've got some big thrust levers. And I teach my cadets in the sim for the airline I work for, treat this aeroplane like a Seneca, a big piston engine aircraft, because essentially that's what it is. It's just got 2 jet engines. But yeah, it's great when you fully disconnect the autopilot and autothrottle on a Boeing aircraft. You are flying the airplane. There's nothing in between manipulating it. Yes, the 777 has fly-by-wire, as does the 78, but it still makes the correct inputs. But 737 is old school. You push on the control column, it moves a hydraulic actuator, and it moves the flight control. Donate. Last question, if you're having a mid-flight meal, do you get a choice other than a scuttle class or not? Well, it really depends. I try to avoid in-flight food because it's not always the best, I think. And if you ate it every single day, you get a little bit of a pot belly. So I actually make my own food. I make my own packed lunches, or my other half does if she's off, if I'm lucky. And I take that to work, especially in the simulator, which is where I work mostly these days. So yeah, just like you guys, I just make myself a packed lunch. MC Kujar Crew, I think that's how you say that. Would you always use cost index 0 when holding? No, once we've got the cost index in, that stays in for the rest of the flight, so we wouldn't make any changes to that. At holding, we'd actually fly the best hold speed. So if I was to go to the FMS here, press hold, do this as an example. Ooh, probably shouldn't have done that, but with ZIBO's mod it's still a work in progress, but we'll put that in, hopefully won't enter the hold, and you'll see here you get a best speed. We just simply fly that speed, which will be the most efficient one to do. But yeah, we'll cancel the hold at Ballon. I don't really fancy doing that. Random guy, would it be possible to get above the maximum altitude the plane could be physically go? Yeah, you could do. The certified maximum altitude for the 800 is 41,000 feet, so that's where in flight testing it's as high as they've taken it and had enough comfortable control. And I've cruised at flight level 410 plenty of times when we have plenty light enough, and yeah, the aircraft could easily go higher, but what it would do, I won't actually know. I've never flown up there, but you'd have to go to quite a slow indicated airspeed to maintain a high Mach number. So yeah, you could get yourself into a bit of a sticky situation, but yeah, we wouldn't ever go above the maximum certified altitude. Nathan Kent, sorry about the question. Did you ever go to college or have a fallback degree? Well, no, I never went to university. I always wanted to do this, and I did have a profession I wanted to do if I ever, you know, couldn't get a medical for whatever reason. So yeah, I always had a backup option available. And if any of you are a little younger, perhaps, and you're thinking of pursuing a career in aviation, may I recommend that you go and see. I wouldn't know what they call them in the States, but in the UK we call them AMEs, or Aero Medical Examiner, and certainly go to CAA and get your Class 1 medical ASAP. You don't want to get your your hearts and hopes high to be told that you've got something like colour blindness or something like that. Just try and be fit and healthy. That's all you need to be. But yeah, there's no real requirements. For myself, I'm short-sighted, so I wear corrective lenses. So don't worry if you've got any issues with eyesight. So long as you can see okay with your corrective lenses, that's not an issue. Gallardo, is hand flying the approach from top of descent sometimes done? Not from top of descent. Airlines will have specific rules regarding hand flying. Some are stricter than others. For example, I think we can fly below 24,500 feet, but it would be pretty stupid to hand fly, let's say if you're flying into London TMA or really busy airspace onto a complex approach. One thing which we don't like to turn off is the flight directors to get rid of all the automation. So if I was to turn it off here on the MCP, oh crikey, that's disconnected my autopilot. It shouldn't have done that. It should have gone into the control wheel steering, but never mind. I hope ZIBO could see that. But yeah, if you turn the flight director off, you lose the guidance, and you then fly a manual. In commercial aviation, there's no real reason to do that. In the simulator, we're in the level D sim, we give plenty of opportunity to hand fly and practice flying with the raudators off. Perfect. So see how we're progressing. We're 1 hour into the flight, 1 hour since we pushed Toga, and we've got 458 miles to run till Palma, arriving with 3.1 tons of fuel. And top of descent around 335 miles or so. Now in reality, a competent line crew would hand over control and start setting up 100 miles before top of descent. I might do it a little bit earlier today so we can look in detail about the approach we're flying, talk you through what my thought process is as we set up for the approach into Palma de Mallorca. That's nice. Jonathan, is it common practice to have the airports displayed on the ND all the time? Yes, we keep the airports on all the time, and it's nice in the cruise to have. Let's imagine we had to divert straight away, you know, or had to descend quickly, or had a medical emergency. It's nice to pictorially see, all right, you know, where do we have nearby? We've got Bordeaux there, Limoges in the distance. There's quite a few airports there. So yeah, generally speaking, both the pilot and first officer would have airports selected on their ND. FS Looks, do you think having scoliosis might affect my class of medical? My friend, I don't know off the top of my head, so the best thing to do is look online. There's quite a few things that can prevent you from doing it, but there's quite a lot of things that can, you know, be fine to have a class 1 medical. In fact, I think there's a pilot in the UK that actually he has a prosthetic limb, I think, or something like that. So yeah, it's best to look online, look at your wherever you live, look at the country's aviation authority website on the medical section. They'll tell you all a long list of things that you can have. Tommy Anderson, why is the yaw damper on during landing? Well, it's on for the whole flight, really. We don't ever turn it off. If you do turn it off, you can suffer from something called Dutch roll, which is a bit of a phenomenon caused by the yaw, but no, always on for normal operations. William, what would you usually pack as a lunch? And when do you eat when in flight? Well, I'm not a fussy eater, so I'll eat whatever I like. Yeah, our low workload time, and the time to eat is exactly what we're doing now in the cruise. During turnarounds, depending on how long we are, if we've got a long turnaround, we could probably eat some food on the ground, but generally that's our busy period when we're working hard. But in the cruise is when the workload's a little bit lower, so this would be the time to grab a bite to eat. Let's have a look here. MCKJKRU. I did see you put your shorter name there, but I'll respond to that. Where can you see the fuel temperature? It's up here, buddy. And if you look here, oop, right at the top. Oh, I don't even know where I'm looking. There we go. There you go. So you can see here, it's -40. It's actually pretty cold. Wouldn't expect it to be that cold this early on in the flight. We have a temperature limit of -43. Or what we call the waxing temperature of the fuel. If fuel gets really cold, it can start getting a bit waxy and a little less viscosity. So we've got to carefully monitor that. If it was to get really cold, this is a bit unrealistic. Shouldn't be this cold. You would have to descend to warmer air. But on the 73, -43 is the limit. We'd have to descend if it was to get any colder. Thomas Nobrego, would you often take enough fuel to do the outbound and return flight? Yeah, very occasionally. We do something called tankering sectors. So if you look at the Lido operational flight plan here, bring it up and scroll on the OFP, come to the top, you'll see on this one it says here no tankering recommended. You see where it says here. Now this is just sim brief. I think it will say that for every sector, but if you're flying into a destination where the fuel is quite expensive, the airline will load up fuel in the departure aerodrome as much as you can. You land with quite a lot of extra fuel to minimise the amount of fuel you'd have to uplift on the return sector. Now on a flight like Palma, if it was tanker, you wouldn't be able to upload enough fuel to be able to do the return sector and back. You'd have to have probably about 17-18 tons of fuel. Now, you could get it in the tanks, but the 737 suffers something called non-environmental icing, which is caused by fuel in the tank. Now, cold, well, you know, we're looking at the fuel tank temperature a second ago. If there's a lot of fuel in the tank, it can freeze on descent, and you can get a lot of ice build up on the wing, even if the temperature's, you know, above freezing. So we generally would limit the amount of fuel we tank to ensure that we land not more than really 4 or 5 tons to prevent this. We call it NEI, or non-icing event, environmental icing. Alright guys, so I'm just going to be leaving for a couple of minutes. We'll be back shortly. I'm just going to get myself a drink and continue with those questions. I'll be back in a second. Okie dokie, so I am back, thanks for that. Quick break. Get rid of that message. So, let's have a look at some of these messages. Actually, I was getting some Red Bull. Well, I'm actually just drinking water because I am working tomorrow. Learned a lot thanks to the hard work. You're more than welcome. John, about ghost aircraft now. Yes, there was no one in the flight deck, so thankfully nothing too bad happened. And hopefully that there's the sun setting, so if we time this rightly, it might. I'm not sure if it'll be quite nighttime approach, but it will be certainly around dusk as we fly into Palma de Mallorca. Eric B, how quickly can you descend in an emergency? Yeah, pretty quickly. If we were to do an emergency descent now, we'd set a lower altitude on the MCP, select level change, speed brake, and we'd bug right up to VMO, MMO, and you could easily get, with the speed brake out, 4,000 or 5,000 feet per minute, maybe a bit more. If it was really bad, you could put the gear down as well, but wouldn't usually need to do that. But if you had to get down from this altitude, you can get to 10,000 feet in about 4 or 5 minutes, no problem at all. Jim Bobolia 33, do you have to be concerned with AIRAC updates, or is it managed so you don't? Yeah, the FMC is updated by the engineers, so every 28 days or so. We just have to check. We have a long checklist of all the documents that we have to have on each aircraft. We just have to cross-check to make sure that the current active is live and active in the FMS. So a little bit of turbulence here, but not too much. You see some weather ahead. We're not caused by that. Good strong wind now coming in from the northeast. And you can see here, if you're new to the 737, this says track. Now this is because it's set, different airlines will set magnetic and heading and track heading. Now this number here, 166, that's the direction we are going, okay, so we're tracking 166. The white triangle here, this is your heading, that's actually where the aircraft is pointing, so we're on a heading of 158 degrees, and the difference between the two, that's 8 degrees, that's the drift. Now in a 737, you know, travelling at, what are we doing now, Mach decimal 78, because you're going so fast, the drift is quite small. But if you're in a light aircraft with this sort of wind, you'd be having a drift of 40-50 degrees or so. So that's the difference between those two. Derek Hormy, do pilots still have a different meal in flight? Yes, they do. That still goes on. So if we have 2 meals on board, I'd have to have a different meal than the other pilot to obviously ensure that we're both not going to get food poisoning if they're the same meal. Sebastian, Pibson, Zakaru, do you guys ever use the centre fuel tanks? Yeah, if we're doing a long sector, we'd have fuel in the centre tank. And at the start of the stream, we did have about 500 kilos or so in there. But we always fill the wings up first. 3.9 tonnes in each wing, so you can hold 7/8, which is the full amount of fuel in the wings. And then any additional fuel we put in the centre tank. Nemes, what is the least amount of extra fuel a plane can have? Well, there is no least amount. The captain has the sole discretion on how much fuel he can take. These myths and stories that airlines, you know, prohibit pilots from taking amount of fuel is complete rubbish. You know, captain has the final discretion how much fuel he can take. That's the end of it. And today the weather's pretty good en route. It's nothing wrong with taking the standard block fuel. We take additional fuel for lots of different reasons: en route weather at destination, low visibility, if we expect holding, anything like that. So let's debunk that myth. Johnny Mark, if you had to descend before top of descent and on heading select, which mode you prefer, let's say from flight level 370 to 330? So if we've been told to descend early, we obviously want to stay for as long as possible, as high as possible, because you've got a higher ground speed, etc, etc. So I'd probably use vertical speed. Now ATC would anticipate us not doing anything less than 500 feet per minute, so we'd select VS 500. You can also use VNAV and push speed out into vent, which is here, and just push out into vent, and VNAV will then automatically descend to 1,000 feet per minute until it captures the vertical profile. Ali Calcadelin, are your landings evaluated like they are in all virtual airlines? Do they go into your PyReps, and if so, does it affect your career? One thing I've always mentioned in my tutorials where possible, and things I comment on, is this obsession with certain virtual airlines and landing rates of descent. People tell me that 500 foot per minute is a heavy landing. I know it is, but it's not measured. It probably is, but I know nothing about it. And as satisfying as a smooth landing is, it's not the criteria for a safe landing. A safe landing is touching down in the touchdown zone at the appropriate speed, and that's what we look for. Okay, it's great if you get a smooth landing, but certainly not a requirement. And the way we teach guys to land this is to land it in the touchdown zone. You know, we want to decrease the rate of descent slightly, but if it's in the touchdown zone and it's a little bit firm, happy days, right? That's all we want to see. Fireblade, do pilots do any kind of customer training or anything that would contribute to skills used outside the confines of the cockpit? No, we don't do any customer sales training like the cabin crew would, but every year we do a day with the cabin crew, a safety recurrency training day. Nothing to do with sales, but we communicate with the cabin crew, we do the safety training with them, so we're on the same boat as well. So there's sort of skills outside the cockpit we would do, but as long as you've got good interpersonal skills and communication, that's all we need. Godatum, how do you step climb? What's our max cruise level? Alright, well, we'll do a step climb if you like, so there's nothing stopping us. No FP doesn't say to do it, but we can do. So if we're to do a step climb, the FMC would typically advise us this is when to do it. You could put here, update the cruise level. So there's several ways you can do it. We'll put 390 here. Oops, wrong box. Just before executing it, you set it on the MCP. So imagine you have flight deck to sim to border radar request climb flight level 390. Yeah, 390 is approved, so that's set. 390 checked, and just don't forget to set it on the overhead panel as well. And you've got so many different ways you could do it. You can press execute, and the aircraft will now automatically climb like this. You get N1 VNAV path, or I could have set 390, pushed out into vent, and then you would have got 390 here on the MCP. So there we go. We'll do a little step climb up to 390, which isn't part of the flight plan, but that's how you do it. Dean Anthony, why do some airlines use the flight control visualizer in the system page on the lower display between the FMCs? How do they actually know the elevators and the ailerons are actually moving? So yeah, you're quite right. Certain Boeing aircraft from Boeing don't have that option. I think the ZIBO mod has it. So when you press system, you can actually see the position of all the flight controls. But if it's not an option, it's fine, so long as when you do the control check before taxiing you've got full and free movement. That ensures that you've got no control difficulties. If you did, you'd notice that in the controls. So just checking that you have full and free movement of all the flight controls is sufficient. Matu Hayes, if you are floating too much on landing, can you abort the landing, or do you force the plane onto the ground? So you can always abort the landing. We always go around minded. So if you're not touching within the touchdown zone, all you got to do is push toga and go around. That's always the safest option. But if you are perhaps a little bit high on speed, what we just say is hold the attitude, and eventually, because you've got the thrust properly closed, the aircraft should be decreasing airspeed quite quickly, and it should settle down on the runway, hopefully within the touchdown zone. Did Southwest 1380 crew descend manually, or could they set vertical speed in the atmosphere? I have no idea. I've only read the kind of reports in the news really about that one. It'd be interesting to see in the full investigation what happened. Either way, they did a fantastic job, I think. Put into that scenario. I mean, if you put a lot of line crew in that scenario, it'd be a very challenging environment to deal with. And things that we do in the simulator, we train like that, but in reality, it's going to be a lot more different. For example, with a rapid depressurization in the sim, you're not going to get any of the physiological effects of the freezing cold temperature, the fact that if you don't put your oxygen mask on, you're going to die, all that sort of stuff there. So either what happened in that incident, they did a fantastic job. Okay, so what we're going to do now, just see how we're progressing on the chart in a second. We're just routing inbound to Marek and then Gaiac. If I just go back to OBS, and here we have the en route chart. And bring the chart up for you guys now. There we go. So here we are, we're inbound to this VOR station here, after Narak to Toulouse, and then continuing southbound to Rokan, Ibrap, Lukev, and then Lorez, and we'll probably start descent just before Lorez into Palma de Mallorca, and we'll be hopefully see Barcelona to the right hand side of the airport as we fly into there. So what we'll start doing, just see how we're progressing, we'll start setting up for the approach in a second. Let's have a look. Yeah, 179 miles. Let's start setting up. So let's imagine the captain was pilot flying for this sector. He would hand over the control to the first officer. Your controls, I'm going to set up for the approach, and different airlines will have different formats of doing this. So the first thing I'm going to do is go into the FMC when we start setting up and go to the descent page. Now, the FMC usually defaults to 240 knots. We'll change this to 250 below 100. There we go. And then on the forecast page, we pre-populate this with the descent wind. So if I bring up the flight plan here, and we'll go to the descent winds, which was down here. There we go. And all we do is copy the winds here, and what we generally do is 310, 200 and 100. So that's what we're going to do, is just copy this information from the OFP into the flight plan. I've actually got a copy of it here, because when I open Explain 11 I can't see the flight plan anymore, and that's all you've got to do. Now, it's important to do this. You don't have to, but if you put in accurate wind information, it'll help the VNAV logic build a really accurate VNAV profile. And again, I don't know how far ZIBO Mod's progressed with this, if it actually has any functionality or not, but maybe it does. Either way, we'll put the information in and see how we get on. Oops. 200 was 039 at 23. And 100 was 040 at 28. Good. Now the ISA deviation isn't working with ZIBO Mod, but what you put here is the temperature difference from the standard international temperature. Now at sea level that's 15 degrees. Now the temperature in Palma, we did get the ATIS earlier, but I'll just upload that on my phone so you can see what the new QNH is or if it's changed. Lima Echo Papa Alpha is the airport code. It's 14 degrees in Palma, so the ISA deviation will be -1, but I don't think functionality works with the ZIBO mod yet. No, it won't let you put it in. And that again just helps with the VNAV descent profile. Now we've put the descent forecast page populated, what we need to now do is the fix rings for the approach. So we'll step through the routing in the FMS shortly so we can check it, and what we're looking for here is the runway. And if you've watched my tutorials, you'll know exactly what rings we put in here. This is the point at 4 miles we're going to go gear down flat 15, and 10 miles is the point at which we must have flap 1 selected. So we just do that to increase situational awareness. And we can also do one that's 3 times our height. So 390 times 3, that's going to be 117, which goes here. And this little ring here should be roughly where top of descent is. We'll talk about descent planning whilst we are descending later on. So if I do this, oopsie daisy, excuse me guys, go to plan and step through here, zoom in slightly. You should be able to see the 3 times altitude ring. There it is, you can see it here. It's not quite depicted terribly accurately, but that's the point at which we top of descent should be at roughly. There's a decel point here, that's because we'll look at the star later. We must be doing no more than 250 knots at Posba. There's Palenza, and it's a Palenza transition onto the ILS. And there you go, you can see the 10 and 4 mile rings. So that's it, we just step through the routing carefully to make sure there's no discontinuities, everything's looking sensible. Right, now we need to bring up the approach chart. Just looking at some of these questions I'll answer in a second, chaps. And it's selected there, and I'll bring up the charts now on OBS. Oh, I just forgot, you still had the flight plan up, guys, sorry about that. And now we'll bring up the chart. So here you can see the approach we're going to fly today, ILS Zulu 24 left. So here, with a Jeppesen chart, all the information is in the briefing strip that you need to basically plug into the aircraft. So starting right at the top, that's all the frequencies you'd expect. This is the MSA, or minimum safety altitude. And you can see here, if you're coming in from the north, which is where we are, the MSA is 7,000 feet. So if we're below 7,000 feet in this sector, you could get yourself into a bit of an issue by hitting the side of a mountain. So we comply with the MSA, we're under radar control, so they all provide vectors and height clearances to ensure that we're above the MSA. They take the responsibility for that, but we must ensure if we didn't have that, we're never below these heights. Now, checking these frequencies, this is all the information we need to put into the pedestal. So the ILS frequency is 109.3, the final approach course is 238. There's a height check at 4 miles, 1349, and then refer to the minimums for this approach. Now, the 737-800 is a Category C aircraft, approach category because of its approach speed, so the minimums are 239 feet. And then lastly, airport elevation 27 feet in the land down. So, with all that information, okay, we can now plug that into the aircraft. So, I'll just get the chart up as well on my iPad so I can reference it easily. There we go, ILS Zulu 24 left. So, frequency for the ILS was 109.3. Just bring the pedestal into view. There we go. But you must put that, for an ILS to work, you've got to have that in both boxes, both nav 1 and 2. Oh, that was going for a bit of a good stretch there. That was almost, I think, 45 minutes with OBS, without OBS crashing. So yeah, I've ran it now as administrator. I'm going to do a lot more studying on OBS so I can stop this from happening in future streams. So this is my first ever time doing anything like this. So hopefully we won't have any more problems later on. I hope this doesn't happen at 6 mile final or at 50 feet, otherwise we're going to have a nightmare. Anyway, what were we doing? I think we were just setting up the ILS frequencies. Here, so we've got 109.3, the final approach track, which is 238, which we can set on the courses. Oops. And now the minimums as well for the approach, which was for category C aircraft 239 feet. Now the minimums are really important. This is the height at which, if we're not visual by, we must fly the missed approach, and that is set independently by both crew members, and then we cross-check what each pilot thinks during the approach briefing, you know, to make sure that we're both on the same page. So we'll just, no need to set it on the FO's side. If you're single pilot in flight sims, you only need to do it on the captain's side, or just on one of the sides. Now the only other thing we need to tune is the missed approach beacon, which is the Juliet Oscar Alpha VOR, which is 17.7. So in the event of a missed approach, we can actually then use that beacon as raw data to fly the missed approach. So that's really all you've got to plug into the aircraft to fly an ILS. We'll do some more live streams, more tutorials where we're doing non-precision approaches, so we can talk about how to set up for those. They're a little bit differently to an ILS. The ILS is pretty standard format. So now we've got the ILS tuned, we can now calculate landing performance. Now I haven't found a way yet. I've got the Boeing OPT onboard performance tool for my electronic flight bag, which is the one we use in the real aircraft. I plugged the figures in pre-flight and I've just updated the weather. Now we've got a ton to burn, so we're arriving with Palma with 3 tons. We've got 4 tons on board, and our current gross weight is 62.7 tons. So if we take a ton off that, this will be our landing weight, which is 61.7. Now on the EFB it said if we take flap 30, order break 3, we should be able to vacate at Sierra 1. So if I bring up the chart again, there we go, I'll show you where we're going to plan on exit and where we're going to park today. Let's go to here and select the airport. So here we are, runway 24 left. This is the runway we're going to land. This is the westerly configuration in Palma, the preferred landing runway. It's 3,000 meters long, but we're going to try and exit here at Sierra 1. Okay, now we always try, we have a maxim that we use in my airline I work for, and that's called brake to vacate. So we always plan to vacate so we can ensure the most expeditious taxi. So, you know, we don't want to vacate all the way here at Hotel 7 if we're parking it, say, on Kilo Apron or just off the Kilo taxiway. So based on the fact that I've planned flat 30 order break 3, we should stop by Sierra 1. And after Sierra 1, we're going to taxi, to show you here, onto Juliet. And then if we bring the parking stands up, we'll continue on to Juliet, left turn onto Golf, and then Victor 2, and we're going to go right in the corner here to stand 32. Alright, right at the cul-de-sac there. So that's it. That's the way we would brief the the taxi routing. Okay, so now I've got all of this in my head during the setup. As pilot flying, you would now start the approach briefing. So going into Palma, one of the things we always discuss are things called threats, and you know, for example, what's some of the threats going into Palma? Well, it's dual runway operations, it's very busy, the airspace is congested, and the taxi routing can be complex. We discuss how we could mitigate that. We then step through the approach chart, just like I did there, to discuss what we've got tuned and selected. We then brief the missed approach procedure, which I won't bother doing today, but I might do again in another tutorial once I'm getting a little bit more fluid of getting charts up on OBS. And then we'd brief the taxi and apron. Now the landing performance, which I've also just calculated now, that would be both done independently by both pilots to ensure that all the information is correct, and then just like with takeoff performance, we'd both agree on the order brake setting and reverse setting. So we're going to use order brake 3, flap 30, and then we're going to use second detent reverse thrust. Now with X-Plane 11 and the ZIBO mod, you just select the reverses and you just move the thrust lever to set thrust manually, which is not quite how it works in the real aircraft, but it works completely fine for a desktop simulator. And that is essentially it. That's the approach. One thing I've not really shown you is the star, so I've kind of missed that part out, but we'll bring the star up here and select the charts option on OBS, and here you can see, as I said, the routing of the star starts at Lores, and then we're going to go to Posba, and that's a speed limit of 250 knots. So what we'll do, another thing I forgot to mention, is that we carefully check all this in the FMC to make sure the routing is correct here. If there's any differences, we'd query that with ATC. So go back to page 1. oops, if you on the real aircraft, if you push legs, it automatically goes back to page 1, but you have to press manually here. And there you go, there's the start of the arrival at Lores, and you can see we would have already have descended by that point, and we should be at around flight level 191. So looking at the chart from Lores, we're going to go to Pushback, and you can see how the distance matches what it says in the FMC. We've got 19.2, and we've got 19, and then we get to Nudsa, and again maximum 250 knots. Oh no, not part of Nudsa, sorry, this arrival goes straight from Pushback to Palenza. If we're on a different transition, we'd go to Nudsa for the other runway, like 06 left and 06 right, but we're going to go from Pushback direct to Palenza, and Palenza is the initial approach fix for runway 24 left and 24 right. Now, only because I know this and I've flown into here quite a few times, Palma radar, I think, wants you 220 knots or less after the initial approach fix. Well, that's really easy to program. All you've got to do is put the speed restriction in and then press execute, and then VNav will plan the path descent to ensure that passing the Palenza VOR we're doing 220 knots. And then after that we're routing to Batham. In reality you probably get vectors to a 10-mile final, but we'll just do the full routing today. And then stepping through the approach chart again, which I'll bring here and bring to the plan view. We'll start off here with Obuma, going back to the FMC, and you can see here at Obuma we need to be at or above 2,500 feet. It's then 3.2 miles, matching exactly what it says on the chart to this point, which is the final approach fix. That's at 7.5 miles DME distance, and then we intercept a 3-degree glide path on the ILS to the threshold. Now the missed approach, that's going to be straight ahead, as I said, to 420 feet, and then just a left turn, maximum 185 knots, climbing to just 3,000 feet. So that's the missed approach, and you can see, whoopsie daisy, how that looks there. Yeah, there you go, max 185 knots, straight ahead, left turn, and intercept the radial, climbing to 3,000 feet. So that is the missed approach. All right. So that's, in a nutshell, is roughly how we do the approach briefing. And we would then hand over control again, and then we would do the descent checklist. Now the one on the control column I think with ZIBO mod is slightly different to the one I'm used to. Yeah, completely different. So the pressurization, we confirm the land altitude set, anti-ice on if required, approach briefing and fuel we've discussed. The alternate today is Barcelona, and we need it to 2.7 tons. And the bugs are set. We've got the VREF, the minimums, and the QNH of 1012 set. And that's it. So that's the descent checklist complete. Handover control, as we said, and we just simply now wait for top of descent, which, if we've timed this correctly, should only be about 59 miles away at 1845 Zulu. So we'll be starting the descent in about 7 minutes. Alright, just having a bit of a glug of water there, so that's where I went off for a second. Let's have a look at some of these questions that have come in since I was setting up for the approach. So that was when OBS crashed. Jim Bobolive 33, is there any way I could listen to ATC during a real flight? Not that I know of, not without probably breaking some laws, so don't know if you could. 2981661, should you not add 40 feet to the minimums? Yes, not for an ILS approach, but we would do for a non-precision approach, like a VOR or an NDB, because that's what we call a non-precision approach, and the minimums are called an MDA, or minimum descent altitude. Now the minimums on an ILS are called a DA, a decision altitude, so at the minimums on an ILS we must decide to continue or go around. Now on a non-precision approach, an MDA, we must not get below that height. Alright, we must not bust that altitude. So we add 40 feet to the minimums there, so when we have to go around with the inertia of the aircraft, we lose about 20 feet after you push toga. Then it climbs away. You don't actually ever get below the MDA. Yeah, Mr. Patlow, same question really. That's why we don't add 40 feet. That's just for non-precision approaches, and certain RNAV approaches we add 40 feet as well. Perfect. Sun setting quite nicely here. Let's actually see. I think we might be just over the Pyrenees now. It's a shame it's cloudy. Let's see how they are in the FSX. X-Plane 11. So there we go. Here's the Pyrenees mountains, and Barcelona is going to be just down there on the right, I think it is. There you go, Barcelona's here, Lima Echo Bravo Lima. Should be on the coastline there quite nicely. Quite difficult to see. Nice colours in X-Plane 11. And this lighting is very realistic. When the sun's coming in, it gets really bright in the flight down. That's really cool. What other questions did I missed here? Johnny Mark, what's the weather in the destination? That's a good question actually. Well, I've got it on my phone, but let's have a look using ACARS, which is pretty cool. It's pretty nice. There was nothing of concern. If I'm off one day, guys, and it's a really nasty day in Europe, there's some storm, we'll crack up the sim and we'll go do some gnarly approaches and do some wind shear escapes and something. That'll be a bit of fun. But I think at the moment the weather in Palma was pretty good, so we'll do an ATIS request. Send, get an updated one, see what the weather's like. But it's pretty good. Runway 24 left in use. I think it was just a light 5-knot wind and a few clouds, and the temperature around 15 degrees or so. It wasn't too bad. X-Plane port, hello, is the Mach number indication this sensitive on the real aircraft? No, it's a little bit, doesn't change as quickly as that. If you get temperature changes, temperature changes that go up and down quite quickly, you can get quite sporadic changes of Mach, but it certainly doesn't change the digits quite like that. Same with the true airspeed and the wind vector there. I think that's just with the limitations of X-Plane 11, how it changes that. One thing I don't like X-Plane 11 or the way it does is light and variable winds. Like if you get the METAR with a light and variable wind, the wind swings all over the place, which has quite a pronounced effect on the aircraft in X-Plane 11. So if they could dampen that down a bit, it'd be quite cool. So let's have a look at the weather at Palma from 17:30 Zulu. So that was about 1 hour ago. Yeah, 310 at 3 knots, so no wind basically. 10k. View at 1500 feet, broken at 5000. 14 degrees now. The QNH is now 1013, so we can update the forecast QNH. Same as standard setting. There we go. And it shouldn't do. It has updated on the PFD. You can only set that manually by moving the EFIS selector. That's it. And let's just do one more view outside because it's cool. There we go. You'll never find in my tutorials me doing this. It's because I like to keep it in the flight deck as a pilot, so you can see. But just to show you, X-Plane 11 with the cool livery. I think did I just see Barcelona over there? I did. Look, there's Barcelona. Very, very nice. So we're just coming over to the Mediterranean Sea now. Airborne for 1 hour 40 minutes and approaching top of descent. What other questions have we got here? What are your graphics settings? If you don't mind showing us, thanks. If you look at my videos, I think not all of them, but I put all the information about the PC at the bottom. It's a Chill Blast PC. I had it built for me at the Flight Sim convention in Cosford, which I went to last year, just to have them help me because I don't know anything about computers, and it's pretty beastly. It runs the sim quite nicely, a lot better than my old laptop used to. But I'll put the details in. All of my tutorials in the future about the PC specs and stuff. I don't know what it is off the top of my head. Thomas Nebrega, would you use flap 40 as a standard flap setting for landing, or is that just for short runway ops? Yeah, flap 30 is the kind of default flap setting we use. Flap 40 is a little bit more drag, a little bit more fuel burns, etc. So we generally use flap 30. Flap 40, yeah, for short runways would be the most common reason. There we go. So top of descent. Reset MCP altitude. As soon as we get that, we just contact Barcelona Radar and flight deck sim, request descent, and let's imagine we're being cleared to flight level 250. is now set, and just prior to top descent, to get it to start going down, just give out into vent a little push, and it'll do 1,000 feet per minute until it captures the vertical profile. And here we go, on we go down. Dylan Jensen, why do airlines turn on the APU after touchdown on the way to the gate when instead could run the plane on engine generators until connected to the GPU? That's a very good question. It's typically because of health and safety. We don't really want ground crew approaching an aircraft with engines running, so we start the APU, and as soon as the engines are shut down, one of the first things ground crew will do is connect the ground power so we can shut the APU off. And airports do have very strict noise monitoring stations. For example, I don't know about Palma, but Barcelona, they actually will fine airlines if you don't have the APU off. I think it's after 5 minutes after being on stand. So yeah, the only situation would be where they would plug the GPU in first, the engine's running, if you had no APU, if the APU was inoperative. So they'd have to get the GPU connected first, otherwise you'd lose all AC power after shutting the engines down. So there we go, we're descending, I think our target speed and descent, Mach decimal 724, and then on transition 273 knots, so a little bit high on speed. This is sometimes normal, guys, so in VNAV it just follows the vertical profile, and it plans to maintain this speed, but it doesn't always maintain it if it gets low or high. You have to manipulate the speed yourself. So if we're getting a bit high on speed, we can use speed brake to slow down. If we get a bit low on speed, we can add thrust. With the auto throttling arm, you can see that I can manipulate the thrust levers to set the thrust accordingly. So we're just going to monitor this. If it gets too close to the VMO MMO, we just use a bit of speed brake to come back to our target speed. Now on transition from Mach decimal 724, we should do 273 knots. GL, are you still using the E6B computer? That's a good one. For those of you who don't know, this is the computer you use when you're doing your flight training, or what's called a whiz wheel, and you use it to calculate things like your ground speed Mach number. I haven't seen mine in about 6 years. It's locked in the attic somewhere, but no, most definitely you don't have to use one of those in commercial aviation. I would have forgotten how to use one now. I think if I got one now, I'd have to spend a few minutes with it to re-familiarise myself. Johnny Mark, what's the dial thing just below the FMA? This is the angle of attack sensor. So this shows you your angle of attack. I don't actually have it as an option on the fleet I fly for the company I work for. We have something called the PLIs, or pitch limit indicators, which appear at low speeds. But yeah, it just shows you the relative angle of attack. I believe, I don't know much about that. As I said, it's not fitted to our fleet. So you can see, look, I've not touched anything, but we're now back onto our target speed, Mach decimal 724, and it should transition to 273. It should have done that now. I'm not sure why it hasn't. Because as you descend, if you maintain a Mach number in descent, your indicated airspeed increases. Passing flight level 300, we can now put the angle of Mach selector back to 25 degrees. And we're approaching the start of the arrival at Lores. Nicola, never learned how to use the E6B, completely useless. Well, once you get used to using it, it's great for flight planning and stuff. I had one for my PPL, and then the one for my CPL I used was a little bit bigger than I did when I did my ACPL ground school. But you do have to have one if you want to do all the exams. You're allowed only a calculator and the E6B, that's all you're allowed to have. Hello Tom, sorry for asking, but is not the real thing set up such that when you change altitude you press the button, you turn? Not on the 7.3, so I think you're saying here, do you push a button here on the button? No, not on the 7.3. I think on the 777-78 and the Airbus they have a push to match heading or push to descend on the knob, but no, not on the 737. Speed's good, target speed's not too far off the present one. If ATC told us to maintain the speed, we'd have to select a different pitch mode and pitch for that. Yari, what cost index are you using at the moment? I'm using cost index 30 for this flight, which is just randomly generated on the flight plan. So, request further descent. So imagine now we've just been cleared to descend to flight level 80. And sometimes, if it's really quiet, for example, if we're going into Palma and there's no aircraft, you can get cleared, you know, straight from your cruise level down to even an altitude. Like if you go into Faro in Portugal, the south coast of Portugal, it's very quiet sometimes. I've been cleared from flight level 360 straight down to 3,000 feet, route direct to a 10-mile final, which is great. You know, that doesn't happen very often. Especially, you'd never get that in London or Paris or Atlanta and in big cities. You know, it's just too much congestion. Gary the Bean, what are the CWS buttons under the autopilot? That stands for control wheel steering. It is a mode which turns the 737 into an Airbus. Basically, you push that. I don't dare do it. Oh yeah, actually it might be working with ZIBO Mod. So now if I push that, if I set my attitude, I'm pulling up on the joystick, it just holds the attitude. So I think the flight directors are not working correctly there. So I will do a dedicated tutorial to explain the use of control steering. But essentially when you push it, you then fly the aircraft using the control column, and you set the attitude and thrust, and if you let go of the control column, the aircraft holds the attitude and roll. Do I ever use it, or have I ever used it on the line? Never, okay, but it is a system you could use it. If you're in severe turbulence, it is a useful mode if you just want to hold an attitude. Perfect, so approaching Lores, descending to flight level 80 on the VNAV profile. Nice and easy. If you're on the magenta line, you've got the accurate information in the FMC, you can stay in VNAV and use the vertical profile. If we were to get vectors or hold or a shortcut, we then have to manipulate the modes to get back onto profile. So I'll bring up the star again for you guys so you can see how we're progressing. 2 seconds. There we go, and there you can see where we are. We're just approaching Lores, and the routing, in reality, you probably get a shortcut after POSBA direct to a 10-mile final. Go this way. We might do that later, but if we leave it as it is, it just should nicely get us onto the approach with idle thrust all the way down. You can see here information on the chart we mentioned in the briefing. SLP is a speed limit point, so we've got to bug 250 knots, which the FMC should do. Clearance limit is initial approach fix, so that's Palenza. If we hadn't been cleared for the approach after Palenza, we'd have to enter the hold straight away, which could be the case if it's very busy, but ATC would advise you of that quite early to tell you, yeah, plan to enter the hold at Palenza. There we go. So now below flight level 200, might be a bit of a nighttime landing. It could be the sun's already set in Palma, so not to worry. Let's just fingers crossed OBS holds it together and doesn't crash. That would be an absolute nightmare. But I'll pause. If it does, I'll pause it straight away and we'll carry on. So passing flight level 200, the pilot monitoring would carefully check the air conditioning and pressurization. Look at these colours. Yeah, this is very realistic as you go through the clouds. That's nice. So inbound to POSBA, and as we approach this decel point on the ND, the aircraft should pitch from its target speed, which is 273 knots, to 250 knots. Automatically, so we'll monitor that. If it doesn't, we'll have to take control. William Arnatus, I'm looking forward to your professional landing. Oh crikey, pressure's on then. Please don't judge my landing in a flight simulator to how I land the aircraft in real life. We'll see how it gets on, but I'll probably smash it down on the numbers, but we'll see. Matthew Hector, do you change your VREF speed according to the wind, or is it always +5 knots like it says in the FMC? So yeah, the standard approach speed is VREF +5 knots. That's the minimum approach speed, and we add up to a maximum of VREF +20 based on the headwind component. We take half the headwind. So if you've got a 20 knot headwind on final, halve that, that's 10, and then you'd fly VREF plus 10 on final approach. Now if you look on my tutorials, I do have a how to calculate your final approach speed tutorial, which goes into detail exactly how you bug that and set that accordingly. So here we go, we're passing the decel point now. There we go, the aircraft's now bugged 250 knots, and the aircraft should now start pitching up to get to 250 knots. Which it doesn't seem to be doing. 5 miles, we might just have to go level change to ensure we're doing 250 at the speed limit point. Yeah, so what it should have done, it should now be pitching up to reduce the rate of the descent to ensure that we're doing 250. We'll wait until 3 miles to see if it does anything. Otherwise I'll just have to ensure that we're doing 250 knots by POSBA. Nah, not doing it, so not to worry. We'll go level change, 250. That's what VNAV should have done for us. It should be now pitched up, and then when we get to POSBA, then descend at 250 on VNAV. So I'm not too sure why it hasn't done that. Crikey, I feel like I'm in a submarine now with all these red lights. There we go, just coming into a bit of cloud. Carefully keep an eye on the temperature. It's only 0 degrees total air temperature, so we might have to put the engine anti-ice on. So because we've gone 250 knots, VNAV didn't seem to cater that. We're on a little bit high on profile, but not to worry. We'll just maintain 250 knots in level change. And in level change, the aircraft now just pitches for a speed with idle thrust. So whatever speed we bug, that's what it's just what the aircraft bugs for. Mike Papa, shouldn't you give some light to your main panel? That is an excellent idea. Good man. I forgot you could do all this stuff with ZIBO's mod, but yeah, you're quite right. So we'll turn all the lights up as we get closer. Turn the background light up. Actually, what I'll do, I'll even turn the dome light on, which we wouldn't generally do, but it would just make things a lot brighter in the sim. There we go. That's better. Good spot, my friend. Gary the Bean, what joystick are you using? It's a Logitech Extreme 3D Pro, which I've been using for about 10 years. So, not going to look so much at these comments now because we need to do something about this. Look, we're 1,000 feet high on profile, so what we need to do is use a little bit of speed brake. And we use a speed brake up to flight detent, and in level change, because it wants to maintain the speed, you can see how the rate of descent is now increasing. Now, I must let ZIBO know the speed brake on this is very effective. In a real aeroplane, it's nowhere near as good as this. Yeah, 3,600 feet per minute, I don't think so. Yeah, look at that, back on profile already. In reality, all it does, it makes the aeroplane shake around a lot, and it doesn't really slow down that much. But anyway, I don't really care, it's worked. Now we're back onto the profile, re-engage VNAV, and we can now stow the speed brake. It worked, but very effective. Oops. That's just to explain trying to catch up with the pitch. We shouldn't have climbed, but we'll recapture the path and descend back again at 250 knots. It's gone into FMC speeds. That's sometimes normal. It just wants to maintain the target speed if you're low. Otherwise, it should go back to retard and arm once you're back on the target approach speed. Yeah, Johnny Mark. Yeah, speed brakes are very effective. They're definitely not as effective as they are in real life. So, approaching flight level 100, or mention we've contacted... Oh, crikey, forgot to put the seatbelt sign on. That would typically be done, guys, at 15,000 feet, which is approximately 15 minutes to landing, so that's something I forgot. There we go, so we're just now waiting for flight level 100 to do the post-cruise checks and get all the lights ready for aircraft. There we go, so now it's gone to 220 knots, because if you remember, we discussed earlier at Palenza, this was the initial approach fix speed restriction. This is the speed they like to have aircraft doing after the initial approach fix. And it looks like now VNAV is actually attempting to get to 220 knots in VNAV path, which is what it should have done back at the speed limit point. So, not sure why it didn't do it there, but it is doing it now. We're easily above flight level 4 or 5, but yeah, we're all looking good now. Alright, so passing flight level 100 for 80, let's do the post-cruise check. So fuel, we have 4 pumps on, and we have 3-4 on board, which is sufficient. And we can now turn on the fixed landing lights, turn off at the logo light as it's night time. APU is off, pressurization is all good and set. Verify the seatbelt sign is on, which we forgot. Push recall, and then we do a PA to the cabin crew to say we have approximately 10 minutes to the landing. Aviator, wait, no smoking off. Well, yeah, that's disconnected in the real aircraft. We use that as a switch to remind us the position of the cabin crew, so it's disconnected. You know, no smoking's permanently banned now in commercial aviation. So we use that switch to tell us the status of the cabin from the flight deck. So I've just got a bit more speed brake out just to ensure that we're doing 220 knots, still in VNAV, 1 to go. Well, imagine now Palma radar has cleared us descent to altitude 4,500 feet, and the QNH is still 1013. So that is now set. We can now select the QNH, stowed speed brake, and we'll do that both sides. Looking good. Passing 8,500 feet for 4,500 feet, and the standby altimeter is set. Yeah, you can't set this or change this on the ZIBO mod at the moment. So, we're looking good, descending to an altitude. We're descending now to Bavam, which is on the extended sensor line. Nice and easily, if you're not under vectors, you just use LNAV and VNAV and monitor the descent profile. So now we can do the approach checklist. We just check the frequencies are tuned for the ILS. We'll turn up the light on this panel as well. Go. So the ILS is tuned 109.3, and the rings we have for the approach for runway 24 left 10 and 4 miles. The idents we don't quite have for the ILS yet, but we will do shortly, and the standby instruments are set for the approach, and the inbound course for the ILS is set 238 to 238, and then you can check the approach checklist is complete. And there, I believe, is Palma De Mallorca. Wouldn't usually be as clear as that with the lights in the clouds, but hey ho. So a little bit of a tailwind here, keeping an eye on that because it's just making our speed creep up. That's pretty realistic. If you're on VNAV path of a tailwind, you can sometimes get the speed run away. So again, just a little bit more speed brake. Don't be afraid to use speed brake as well in the sim. It's some people think, oh, if you use speed brake, it means you've messed up your descent plane. It doesn't matter. It's a tool. Use it if you need to. So. Imagine now we've been told what's the next step altitude. Usually ATC would clear you down to the step altitude. So yeah, we've been cleared to descend to 2,500 feet, and you've been cleared for the ILS, and we're just going to initially arm Vorlock as we intercept the localizer. Now you can arm approach straight away for the ILS, but if you are this far away, 20 miles in fact, you can get the ILS the glide path on the ILS scallop or go up and down a little bit. That's because we're outside the designated operational coverage area of the ILS. ILS glide slopes aren't very accurate outside of 12 miles, so we will wait until we're a bit closer to arm approach. The localizer's good until up to about 17-20 miles or so, but we're certainly close enough there. Now this is one thing I noticed with X-Plane 11. I do not like this flashing light from the strobes. That is, you do get a little bit of flashing from the clouds, but it's nowhere near like that. That's like too bright, so I'm just going to put it to steady, just to sort of have an epileptic fit really. Right, as soon as we're out the clouds we'll put the strobes back off, but that flashing white light is not very realistic. So localizer capture, set runway heading 238, speed's good, carefully monitoring the approach, and we'll arm approach when we get a bit closer onto the ILS. I'll look at some of these questions later, but I want to really concentrate on the approach so you can see as realistically as possible what I'm doing. So again, here comes the speed brake because I don't want to get too high on speed. Because you stow it back. There we go, out the clouds, I'll put the strobes back on. Wouldn't usually do that, it's just to stop the flashing lights. So we're looking good. ILS we're just kind of following, the vertical profile's putting us on the ILS nicely, and I don't really want the speed running away too much, and what I'm going to do now is use vertical speed to manually place myself on the ILS, and we're going to go straight to flap 1 as we approach 10 miles, and we'll bug the flap 1 speed, and I'm just going to use vertical speed to stay on the glide path to maintain a continuous descent. Now I'm really quite fast here, so long as I'm below 250 knots you can select flap 1, but ideally you don't want to be going this fast. Selecting it, but just to keep it all steady. So I've got speed brake and flap 1, which is fine, and just using VS to stay on the glide path. Now she's struggling to slow down a little bit, not too much. We'll go flap 5 now, we've got the green light. And we'll imagine we've contacted Palma Tower because it's just us in the sim. We've been cleared to land, so we'll pop all the lights on. That's something I don't need to worry about. So approaching 12 miles now, we should be able to arm approach. There we go. Glide slope capture, missed approach altitude, 3,000 feet is set, and we can now bug the flap 5 speed. We'll just keep the speed brake out for a little bit longer, just so we can get to around 180 knots. Good, so speed's coming back nicely. Swinging around a little bit there. As I said, that's a little bit of a... It doesn't usually move like that, that's just how it works with X-Plane 11. So we can now slow the speed brake. Speed's nicely under control. We can go to flap 10 if we need to. And... oh, something else I wanted to explain. Yeah, I think with the settings here... yeah, oops. Lost the mode there. Approach, yeah, I think I had... if I put GS on, I get the correct FMAs now. So carefully monitoring the speed. Just coming up a little, still not slowing down, so I'm going to use flap 10, which is a little bit more draggy than flap 5, and then we could still use speed brake if we needed to. Approaching 7 miles yet, and we'll just use a tad of speed brake just to get the speed back to flap 5. There we go, approach lights in sight. We'll put the gear down at 4 miles. You can see here speed brake flap 10, it's struggling to hold the speed. The auto throttle should be closed. There we go, so we'll slow the speed brake now. Should be able to maintain that speed now. There we go, approach lights are in sight straight ahead, all stabilised, looking good. We'll seat the cabin crew for landing. I sound 14, thank you. I'm a little bit older than that, but I guess I have a very youthful voice, forever that may stay. Cool, yeah, I'll have a look at the comments after landing when we get onto stand, so if you have any questions you can answer it, then we'll end the stream. So here's 4 miles, we'll start configuring to land, so gear down, flap 15, match the speed, and we'll do the landing checklist to flaps. Start switch is continuous, record is checked, speed brake, armed green lights. Go now to flap 30 straight away. Speed brake, armed green lights, landing gear down 3 green, auto brake set to 3, holding on the flaps. We now have flap 30, 30 required, 30 selected, green lights. The landing lights are on. We have been cleared to land. Okie dokie, so this is what it all comes down to. Get ready to disconnect. Good luck for the landing. Thank you very much. Alright, let's disconnect now and see how we get on. So, looking at the flight directors primarily at this point. Appies look good. Speed's okay. There's no wind at all now.
500.
That's checked, fully stabilised at 500 feet. Just really small inputs, approaching the minimums. You can see the lights coming into view now. Keeping it 2 reds, 2 whites all the way down. Back onto the centre line. Speed's okay. Continue. Back onto the centre line. Small changes in thrust, if any, to keep the speed on target speed. Getting a little bit of balloon there, a bit high.
50, 40.
Check, close, hold the attitude, oh, balloon slightly not good, in the touchdown zone though, there we go, speed brakes up, reverses, 2 reverses, 72%, oh crikey, what's all that smoke, I can't see, 100 knots, 80 knots, the auto brake's so strong at ZIBO mod, 60 knots, manual braking, and we'll take the first exit here, crikey. What's all this I'm in? Is it my reverses? I don't know if it's a wet runway, but it's pushing all the water around. Anyway, there we go. There's the first exit at Sierra 1. Good job. Well, I hope you enjoyed that, guys. 2 hours 6 minutes. That's exactly what it said on the Sim Brief OFP. It was exactly 2 hours 6 minutes. That's how good that is. Alright, so here's Sierra 1. We'll just clean up the aircraft, bring it to a sensible taxi speed of less than 10 knots. Bring the flaps up. transponder to out of. Trim to 4 units. Stow the speed brake. Water brake to off. 3,100. 100 knots. Bring it slow right down so we can check the taxi routing. And strobes now off. Start switches to off. Retracts and fixed landing lights off, and the probe's off. That's it. I've just brought the aircraft to a stop so I know I'm not going off the taxiway. That's it. Confirm the master caution, which will be probes for the anti-ice. Alright, so we're going to taxi to standard 32, so I'll just bring the charts up so you can see them, the airport chart, and hopefully you can see that now. And we're going to make the taxi here, zoom in slightly as well, to the right here. There doesn't seem to be any taxi line here to get us from Sierra 1 to Juliet, so we're just going to make a slight right turn. And as I said, we're going to come in on Juliet and then go in via Golf for stand Victor 2. So I'll bring the charts up for myself. And we'll change it to the parking stand. Oh, not seeing where I'm going because I've got the charts up right in front of me, blocking the view. So yeah, as I said, we're going to go via Juliet, in via Golf, and then stand 32 is right in this corner here. So if I come here, Golf, 32's there, and that's it. We've already cleaned the aircraft up. We just taxi into stand from that position there. So we'll keep our eye out for Golf to make that left turn. Very good. Thanks for some of these comments. Nice job. Thank you very much. Carbon Live, what speed do you normally taxi in reality? Well, up to 30 knots on the taxiway. That's the limit we go up to. And the apron is 15 knots, so as you actually exit the taxiway, down to 15 knots. Aviator, can you use runway turn-off lights while you are taxiing? Yes, we have the taxi and turn-off lights on when we're taxiing at night time and daytime. It's just the retracts and fixed landing lights which we turn off. Okie dokie, so here's Golf. We can make the turn here to the left. Alex Play, now you're going to show you the replay? Yeah, we'll do the replay of the landing on X-Plane 11, see how it got on and stuff. So this way, I'm going to take the second left, which is Victor 2, where the green taxi line lights are. Cut the corner a little bit. I wouldn't usually do that, but just to save some time. And we made it just before, well, I think it was just after sunset when we landed, but nice colours in the sky. There we go. It looks like, crikey, we're probably quite close to this post here. I hope we didn't actually get a wing strike, but see out the wing here on the right hand side. Yeah, I think it's a wet runway or a wet taxiway. You can see all the marks there. Not sure why that is. Simon Garner, would you ever use strobes during taxi? No, only when crossing a active or active runway. If that was the case, we turn the strobes and all the lights on just to increase visibility, but for taxiing, not the case. Crikey, that's really close to that post. You don't want to be any closer. Cool, yeah, it's missed it, but not by much. Where in the world is stand 32, by the way? There's 36. Oh, there it is. It's into a bit of a cul-de-sac with no taxiway lines, but I've been on this stand in real life. There are taxi lines. I'm telling you how to get here. Not to worry. Cool. There's stand 32. So I started the APU, as you saw. Should be ready for the on the bus when we get there. Where is stand 32? Crikey. Not to worry. I think we'll just take these lines here. I think that's stand 32. Anyway, not to worry. Cool, so APU should hopefully have timed this well. There we go, on the bus. And I will try and guesstimate where the stand park point is for a 737, but we'd have a master in reality or the gate guidance. So, bring the aircraft to a stop, parking brakes set, 2 blues, 1 red, engines dead, get the passengers off. do a PA, cabin crew disarm slides and open doors. Welcome to Palma de Mallorca. We'll do the full shutdown checklist. We'll leave one on for the APU, window heats, electric hydraulic pumps, packs to off, trim air off, and then that's pretty much it. The only thing we now need to do is at 20% N2, there we are, is turn the anti-collision light off, and that's it. The aircraft is now fully shut down. So yeah, let's have a look at the replay for that. I think that'll be quite interesting to see the landing. That'll be quite cool. So we'll just play back slightly. Oh my goodness me, there we go.
500, 400.
There we go, and what we'll do, that's normal plane mode, we'll just go to the external view. Oh crikey, that's not realistic. Yeah, it looks like we had the contrails coming from the engines. I don't know if that's a glitch, but we'll just pause the sim for a second. Let's do it from this one here. Yeah, it looks like there's a bit of a glitch there. I would be very worried if that was coming out of the aircraft after landing. Let's see how the landing was. Whoa. A little bit of a skip, not too bad, it's a bit dark. Yeah, when you do the replay it doesn't illuminate all the things properly, but we had a bit of smoke puffing out all the way there from the replay there, but that was it. Cool, so just before I go, I'll just go through some of the questions we had on approach and landing which I missed out. If you had any, oh crikey, quite a few. Landing gear down, butter the Boeing, nice approach. Smoke evacuate, very good. Yeah, smoke is generated from the reverse thrust. Well, I don't know if that was glitching, but yeah, that was a bit excessive. You would get a little bit of reverse thrust if it was a very wet runway. You get a bit of moisture coming forward as you get low on speed, but otherwise nothing else. Could do a checklist. Yeah, Mike Papa weather radar off. Very well spotted. Otherwise, all the ground crew will be growing extra limbs and things like that. Madhu, what was the cost index? It was cost index 30. Thanks for the stream. You're welcome. That's about it, really. So yeah. Anyway, guys, I hope you found that enjoyable and learned something new. As I said, it was a bit of a test today, and for those of you who joined kind of at the beginning and halfway through the stream, you saw I was having some technical difficulties with OBS, so really sorry about that. We worked around it though. Pause the sim. I'll try and find out what the cause was for that, so we don't have that issue in the future. Anyway, that's essentially it. If you have any questions, I will archive this stream once I've edited out all the things that happened, but do like and subscribe. I've got plenty of other content with other tutorials if you're interested in seeing them, and I hope to see you for another live stream in the very near future. Keep an eye on my Instagram and Facebook pages, because I'll put some suggestions for tutorials and live streams, and your feedback is greatly appreciated. Anyway, thank you very much, and I'll see you all again very, very soon. Bye bye.